Chapter 896. The attacking giant in his giant ape form. The great sage went berserk. He was like an attacking giant, trampling and tearing apart the ant-like zombies. The zombie progenitors had no choice but to evade his attacks and flee in panic. Where could he be? Su-Yun's gaze was fixed on the sky. Suddenly, he stopped and stared at the clouds, as if he wanted to pierce through them. Oh! The brocaded young man, standing in the clouds, arched his eyebrows. He smiled playfully, then looked at Su-Yun. He found us. Whoosh! At that moment, a ray of light shot towards them. The shadowy young man frowned. You dare attack. With that, he scowled and prepared to attack. With a flip of his hand, he dispelled Su-Yun's attack, then frowned. You're right. Don't cause trouble. I've already broken the clan's rules by coming here. Your clan's rules really are troublesome, snorted the young man. The young man in luxurious clothes snorted, and then he revealed a sneer and said, Forget it. I came down this time for that monkey, so I won't care about that fellow. That's for the best. The young man beside him frowned and nodded. At that moment, the jade pendant at his waist flashed. Little sister. The young man placed the pendant in his hand. Third brother, where are you? I'm drinking with a few friends. What's wrong? Replied the young man, his expression cold. Drinking? The voice in the pendant was clearly suspicious. Let me see who you're drinking with. I don't think that's appropriate. They've all drunk too much, and their clothes are a bit messy. You're not married yet, so it's not appropriate for you to see this. Besides, you'll be getting engaged in a few days. How about this? I'll return to the clan. If there's anything you want to say, we can talk about it when we get back. Slap. The young man put the pendant back on his waist, then looked at the young man in the luxurious robes. Little sister is starting to suspect me. Don't waste any more time. Hurry back. No problem. The young man shrugged. The young man turned and left. Then his gaze fell on the berserk great sage. He flicked his finger. The great sage's right leg was pierced through, and a mist of blood sprayed out. Bang! He fell to his knees. When the surrounding blood zombies saw this, they pounced on him without any hesitation, especially under the stimulation of the blood energy. When he saw the great sage surrounded by blood zombies, the sinister youth's lips curled into a disdainful smile. Humph, trying to steal my woman? You're not worthy. Let's go. The young man in front furrowed his brows. The well-dressed young man sneered at the great sage, then chased after him. With a flash of light, the two disappeared. Not long after they left, Linru appeared at their previous location. Damn it! Among the demons, Su-Yun's expression was grim. Sure enough, he'd found the right place. It really was deep within the clouds. However, there was nothing he could do against them. The great sage's leg was severely injured, and the black dragon was still by his side. If he made a move now, he would definitely be discovered. Good luck to you, Su-Yun murmured, then turned his head back and closed his eyes in concentration. Right now, he had to conserve his strength. Before long, he might need it. Amidst the blood zombies, the sudden injury forced him to kneel on the ground. The pain in his leg caused him to howl incessantly. Wave after wave of zombies swarmed him. In just a few breaths of time, zombies crawled all over him. The zombies grinned, drool dripping from their mouths. Then their gazes changed. Bite! Roar! The berserk great sage let out a furious roar. His eyes were bloodshot as he rose to his feet and sent the zombies flying. The zombies that broke free from his body still had some of the great sage's hair or blood on their teeth. Roar! With another roar, the great sage focused all his hatred on the ant-like zombies. An opportunity. Jiang Chun couldn't help but arch his brows when he saw the great sage turn around and chase after the zombies. The zombie progenitors gathered by his side, then heard Jiang Chun's voice. This monkey has gone berserk and has lost all rationality. Everything he does is based on wild beast instincts. After going berserk, his strength has multiplied, but judging from how the zombies tore at him just now, it's clear that his defenses haven't changed much. Furthermore, he's injured his leg for some reason. This is an opportunity for us. Big brother, what do you think we should do? Asked the emaciated Ho Ching. What else can we do? Just kill him, said the bare-chested Ingo, his expression murderous. Then should we ally with the demons? asked Hanba. She knew about the agreement between Jiangchun and the demons. Ally with them. Jiangchun snorted coldly. Right now, they can't wait for that monkey to destroy us. Yet you want them to help us? This offensive and defensive alliance is all talk, but if it really concerns our own interests, then it's useless. Then what else can we do? We can just attack. Ingo wasn't in the mood to chat with them. Without the slightest hesitation, he charged at the great sage. Ingo! Jiangchen roared, but Ho Qing waved him off. Don't mind him. That's just how he is. Let him go. Although he's not very bright, he has a keen sense of smell when it comes to fighting. There won't be any problems. Tell me your plan. Jiangchen's expression froze. Actually, I don't have a plan. We haven't had enough time, and we still haven't figured out the monkey's characteristics after going berserk. But we can't just let things go on like this. Let's fight while we watch. All right. The other zombie progenitors attacked one after the other. By now, Ingo was already behind the great sage. Big guy, eat my fist. Bang! His fist slammed into the great sage's calf. Ingo's full-force attack would have shattered even a Sky Immortal expert, but it had no effect on the great sage at all. The great sage continued to hunt down the zombies. Ingo frowned. Don't underestimate me. Bang! He punched again. This time, however, his punch attracted the great sage's attention. He watched as the great sage slowly turned his head, eyes as large as his head, calmly glanced at him. Come on! Ingo's eyes flashed with excitement. He was itching to fight, but then he saw the great sage crouch down. Oomph! Ingo's nostrils flared, almost sending him flying. The great sage reached out and flicked his finger. Bang! Ingo, who stood before the great sage, flew helplessly into the sky. Meanwhile, Jiangchun and the others behind him stopped. Chapter 897. Chapter 897. The great sage's weakness. Jiangchun reached out and blocked Hanba and Ho Qing's path, then stared intently at Sun Wukong. Coincidentally, Sun Wukong was looking back at them. His scarlet eyes glinted with a terrifying light. Jiangchun and the others couldn't help but gulp. Fortunately, the great sage only glanced at them a few more times before turning around and ignoring them. Instead, he directed his hatred towards the blood zombies. Phew! Jiangchun let out a long sigh of relief. Hanba and Ho Qing did the same. Hey, you're still beasts that take up a third of my soul. Do you really have to be so scared? Jiangchun couldn't help but frown. But you're still our main body. Aren't you panicking too? Ho Qing rolled his eyes. I was just a little tired from running, said Jiangchun without batting an eyelid. Ho Qing and Hanba rolled their eyes at him and ignored him. Bang, bang, bang. At that moment, Ingo, who'd crashed into the mountain, ran over, dragging his heavy feet. They thought this thick-skinned guy would say something that would make them speechless, but to their surprise, this guy's pretty strong. There was no trace of his usual color on his face. He collected himself and stared solemnly at the enormous creature that blotted out the sky. Just now I caught him off guard and punched him twice. I'm quite confident in my strength. Even those humans, peak Sky Immortals, probably couldn't take a punch from me. Even if the beast race has astonishing defenses, an early-stage Sky Immortal beast like him definitely couldn't take a punch from me. But when I hit him just now, he didn't even react. He ignored me like I tickled him. And his strength. To tell the truth, I've always been proud of my strength, but when I faced him, the difference was like the difference between heaven and earth. No one expected Ingo to be the one analyzing the situation. Jiangchun and the others glanced at each other, shocked and solemn. If Ingo cared so much, just how strong was the berserk monkey? But the blood zombies really did hurt him. I'm absolutely right about that. Jiangchun watched as the blood zombie bit through the monkey's back. Although he didn't understand why the monkey hadn't been turned into a zombie, he couldn't hide his pained howls. Only now did he feel that the monkey's defense didn't change at all after going berserk. But just now, Ingo had personally tested his defense. Could it be that Ingo's attack happened to be where his defense is stronger? Ho Qing, who could be considered the brains of the zombies, said, if we treat him like a normal beast, the defenses of his legs and arms must be stronger than the other parts of his body. Next are his back, abdomen, face, and eyes. Let's not care about anything else. No matter what race he is, even if he has gone berserk, his eyes are still his weakest spot. Ho Ching is right. Hitorigami nodded. Jiangchen nodded. Even for zombies, the eyes were their weakest point. Let's do as Ho Ching said and attack his eyes. As long as we can injure his eyes, we'll have won half the battle. Especially the heavy rain now. It's especially beneficial for us. All right. Bang. The berserk great sage stomped again. His furry feet had already crushed countless blood zombies. He was surrounded by mountains of corpses and seas of blood. The pungent stench of blood permeated the air. The smell of blood stimulated his bestial instincts, and it also stimulated the group of blood zombies that did not fear death. Splat! He grabbed a few blood zombies and crushed them. Fresh blood flowed down his furry hands. Just as he tossed the crushed zombies to the ground, he saw Ingo, bare-chested, attack him from the side. HM? The berserk great sage stopped and stared at Ingo, as if he'd just slapped the ant flying. Bang! His fist slammed into the great sage's cheek, but Ingo didn't attack again. Instead, he landed on the ground, wiggled his butt, and taunted. Hey, monkey, come after me. Ow! Ho Ching's analysis was correct. The great sage's hairless face really wasn't as strong as his legs. Ingo's all-out punch hurt. Then he saw his opponent provoke him. This ant actually dared to provoke him. Without hesitation, the great sage chased after him. So he really came. When he saw the great sage's provocation succeed, Ingo glanced at the enormous creature chasing after him and fled. Roar! The berserk great sage chased after him. Although his movements were slow due to his current size, he was still very tall. With every step he took, he had to catch up to Ingo. Even though he ran at full speed, he could still feel the great sage closing in on him. Ingo's heart raced. He could already feel the tremors on his back. It wouldn't be long before the monkey caught up to him. He gazed at the ancient tree in front of him. Soon, as long as he reached it, he'd have a chance to turn the tables. Almost there, almost there. Attack! Just as Ingo reached the ancient tree, he roared. Swoosh! Hamba, Jiangchen, and Ho Ching, who'd been hiding in the tree for a long time, emerged at the same time. They only had one goal, to blind the great sage's eyes. The enraged great sage saw the three ants, but he didn't care about them at all. All he wanted to do was squash the ant that made him feel pain. Stab! The division of labor was clear. Ho Ching landed on the great sage's neck. His hand instantly transformed into a sharp claw that stabbed viciously into the great sage's neck. Roar! The great sage roared as he chased after Ho Ching, then reached out to grab him. Go blind! At that moment, Jiangchen took advantage of the opportunity to stab the great sage's left eye with a sharp blade. Roar! The pain in his eye was unbearable. The great sage leapt to his feet and roared. He reached out and sent Jiangchen flying. Hamba, who'd been about to stab the great sage's right eye, was also mercilessly sent flying. Roar! He roared incessantly, blood dripping from his eye. Then, roar! His fur instantly turned blood red. His nostrils flared up in ragged breaths. At the same time, he shook his neck and tossed Ho Ching to the ground. Oomph! Hamba, Ho Ching, and Jiangchen couldn't help but grunt. But to their despair, their vision darkened. Then they saw the great sage lift his foot high into the air. You came just in time. At that moment, a chuckle resounded through the air. Before long, they saw Gu Li smile faintly. He looked at the great sage, who was only filled with animalistic instincts. This is my subordinate. How could a beast like you possibly touch him? He punched out. Chapter 898. A changing future. TCH, how tragic. Within the primal chaos space, Gu Zichen sat cross-legged on a chair as he watched the scene through the curtains. The great sage was currently being tortured. If I look at the time, that brat Gu Li should be here by now. As soon as he finished speaking, Gu Li appeared on the screen and sent the berserk great sage flying with a single punch. HM. When he saw this, Gu Zichen furrowed his brows. He pointed to the left, and the screen returned to when Gu Li had first appeared. Pause. Zoom in. How could this be? Gu Li carried a long sword on his back. Judging from the engravings on it, It was undoubtedly the Chiyu sword. You shouldn't be holding the Chiyu sword right now, so why? Gu Zichen furrowed his brows, then shook his head. He waved his hand and removed the screen, then turned his gaze to Yi Zichen. Is this the butterfly effect? You don't have much time left. Whether that monkey lives or dies is up to you. Yi Zichen sat on the ground like a meditating monk. There were no fluctuations of energy emanating from him at all. Even his breathing was barely discernible. However, at that moment, a broken sword emerged from between his eyebrows. The small, golden sword circled above his head. It was originally dim, but now it suddenly began to shine with golden light. The hand seal that had fused with Yi Zichen's body emerged as well. Boundless spiritual energy transformed into a vortex that continuously poured into the broken golden sword. At the same time, the two halves of the sword slowly joined back together. How could this be? Off in the distance, Gu Zichen was stunned once more. He stared at the golden sword in astonishment. Why? Why was the condensed divine spark still there? Shouldn't this divine spark be shattered? He'd experienced it himself. His godhead had shattered under the power of heavenly lightning. After ascending to the god realm, he'd condensed another godhead. As he considered this, a scroll appeared before him. This was the godhead he'd condensed a second time. By now, he was so shocked he couldn't speak. The Chiyu sword shouldn't have appeared by Gu Li's side. His shattered godhead had reformed. The current development was completely out of his control. This was completely contrary to the future he knew. Normally, the power of the Lord of the Three Realm Seal would have been transferred to Yi Zichen, raising his strength to the level of a supreme, then heavily injuring Gu Li. But the future had changed. Gu Zichen didn't know whether this was good or bad, but he did know that without the power of the seal, Yi Zichen was absolutely no match for Gu Li. Not necessarily. If this godhood could be condensed again, who knew? Gu Zichen suppressed his astonishment and stared intently at the golden sword, which was devouring the energy of the hand seal. The dull sword was now releasing a dazzling light. The two halves of the sword had completely fused back together, but there were still some cracks on its body. Fuse. Gu Zichen prayed inwardly. All he could do now was pray that the godhead would fully recover. Otherwise, Yi Zichen wouldn't be able to play around anymore. At that moment, Gu Zichen furrowed his brows. We're already here, yet you're still able to spy on me? You guys really are pulling out all the stops. Gu Zichen snorted calmly, then quickly formed a hand seal. A rippling bubble enveloped Yi Zichen. Next, his lips curled into a smile, and he stared intently at the chaotic void. If you want to attack me right under my nose, I'm afraid you'll have to train for tens of thousands of years. Whoosh. Gu Zichen, who was sitting on his chair, suddenly disappeared from the chaotic void. Inside the bubble, the sword between Yi Zichen's eyebrows continued to absorb the seal's energy. Along with the passage of time, the damage patterns on the small sword gradually decreased, and the body of the sword became more and more translucent. After a long while, the handprint hovering in the air gradually dimmed, and the spiritual energy it had accumulated gradually dried up. After releasing the last drop of spiritual energy, Yi Zichen fell to the ground. The little sword, which had been absorbing his spiritual energy all this time, shook a few times, then burrowed into Yi Zichen's forehead. However, the cracks on its body hadn't completely healed. The instant the sword burrowed into his forehead, Yi Zichen, who'd been meditating like an old monk, opened his eyes. The moment he opened his eyes, a tangible golden light shot out from his eyes. His profound gaze was like that of an ancient emperor's unassailable might. After a long silence, Yi Zichen stood up from the ground and bent down to pick up the dimmed hand imprint. "You little bastard," he muttered softly. Obviously, by little bastard, he was referring to the golden sword. Then, he looked at the handprint in his hand. "It seems you've absorbed all of its accumulated spiritual energy. It's useless now, but it's still the symbol of the master of the three realms. I'll pass it on to my descendants in the future. I just hope the next one doesn't blame me." Yi Zichen shook his head and put the seal away, then looked around. "Why isn't Gu Zichen here? Isn't he just wasting my time? He furrowed his brows, then walked up to Gu Zichen's chair and sat down. He held his breath and concentrated. He had to seize every second. He had to increase his spiritual energy. An hour passed. Whoosh. Gu Zichen, who'd disappeared into the primal chaos, reappeared. He looked exhausted and panted heavily. Then he saw Yi Zichen sitting in his chair, meditating. It was over. You're back. Yi Zichen, who was in the middle of regulating his breathing, opened his eyes. He glanced calmly in Gu Zichen's direction, then shouted irritably, "Hurry up and send me out. Do you know how much time you've wasted?" After a brief moment of silence, Gu Zichen spoke up. Has your godhead recovered? Why do you care so much? You know better than anyone whether it's recovered or not. Yi Zichen frowned at him. Bro, you've wasted too much of my time. If you keep wasting time like this, I think we should just go find the next one. Gu Zichen furrowed his brows. He hadn't seen the final result, so he didn't know if his godhead had fully recovered. If it hadn't, then. But he had no other choice. It was just as Yi Zichen had said. If they delayed any longer, they really might have to go find the next one. Now that the future had changed, this might be a good opportunity for them. All right, then let's go. When he considered this, Gu Zichen no longer hesitated. The future was no longer in his control, so he might as well leave it all up to Yi Zichen. Chapter 899. To prolong your life. The earth quaked and the mountains shook. The behemoth great sage fell to the ground with a loud crash. It was like an earthquake. Even those who were far away could feel the tremors of the ground. Everyone present had forgotten about it. Gu Li, Black Dragon, clenched his fists. Earlier, because Gu Li was Chiyo's reincarnation, he'd placed him among the demons. But in the end, he occupied the nest of the magpie, making the entire demon race unable to return home. Fortunately, Brother Su opened up a space for them. However, Brother Su's lifespan is approaching its end. For the future of the devil race, he had no choice but to go to the upper realm to fight for the territory, and he even sacrificed hundreds of thousands of people of the devil race. It was all thanks to Gu Li. This sort of hatred couldn't be washed away with time. The other demon sovereigns did the same. They stared at Gu Li with bloodshot eyes, especially Li Min. In the beginning, there were only 2 women among the 12 demon sovereigns. One of them was her, and the other was Hua Kuei. Since she was also a woman, she had the best relationship with Hua Kuei among the demon lords, even though the 2 of them were always at odds with each other. But Hua Kuei's death was caused by Gu Li. Gu Li, Gu Li. Li Min clenched her fists so hard they cracked. She glared at Gu Li, her eyes blazing. She didn't reprimand him, but merely muttered in her heart. However, it was precisely this kind of muttering that could better reflect the fury in her heart. This monkey can't be Great Sage Sun, right? Gu Li tilted his head and looked at the fallen Great Sage, who hadn't gotten up for a long time. When I was in the modern realm, I was deeply affected by Journey to the West, and I really admired the awe-inspiring Great Sage Sunday. It's just that I didn't expect that the Monkey King Sun Wukong would actually become like this. TSK, TSK, so pitiful. He slowly descended to the ground. In front of the Great Sage, Gu Li seemed incomparably tiny. However, he looked at the Great Sage with pity in his eyes and shook his head. Roar! The Great Sage roared as he slapped out with his huge palm. He was furious right now. These ants had actually injured him. He wanted to kill all of these ants. Gu Li's palms, as big as prayer mats, carried with them a strong gust of wind, but his expression remained as compassionate as ever. Crack! Roar! He forcefully broke the Great Sage's hand. Without any hesitation, he crippled all 4 of the Great Sage's limbs. Roar! The Great Sage screamed miserably, but Gu Li simply shook his head repeatedly. Your Excellency Gu Li. The zombie progenitors hurried over as well. They looked at Gu Li with a hint of fear in their eyes. When he left the Buddhist domain, he was still so weak and incomparably small. But why did he become so strong in just a day? Humph! You don't have to thank me. If you work for me, I will naturally ensure your safety. With that, he ignored them and turned his gaze to the demon clan. More accurately, it landed on Sui Yun. Brother Su, it's been a long time since we last met. Do you regret my decision to recruit you? If you do, I can still treat you as an honored guest and extend your life. Black Dragon wanted to scold Su Yun, but he swallowed his words. Extend his life. Everyone valued their own lives. He knew full well that Su Yun didn't have much time left. He'd thought of countless ways to extend his life, but to no avail. Now, Guli was saying this with such certainty. He trusted Su Yun's friendship with the demons, but when his life was at stake, he wasn't sure if Su Yun would agree or not. If Su Yun really agreed, Black Dragon didn't think Su Yun would blame him. You're nearing the end of your lifespan, aren't you? Black Dragon must have found quite a few natural treasures to extend your life, but they all failed. He has no idea why you've lost so much of your lifespan. That's why he randomly tried to find natural treasures for you to eat, but they didn't work. He doesn't understand, but I do. I can extend your life. For 1,000 years, no problem at all. Gu Li's lips curved into a faint smile as he spoke confidently. I admire Brother Su's attainments and formations. So long as you come, how about we split the world evenly? Or I could just hand it over to you. You should know that my ambitions lie elsewhere. Besides, you're the literati star, while I'm the North Star. Brother Su, what do you think? The literati star? The Emperor's star? The demons' hearts were filled with bewilderment, but Black Dragon stared at Su Yun and Gu Li in astonishment. The demons didn't know, but as their commander-in-chief, he naturally knew some inside information. Brother Su was actually the literati star. No wonder his attainments and formations had risen so quickly. But Gu Li was the Emperor's star. He didn't dare confirm it, but he knew that if Su Yun really was the literati star, he would definitely be able to sense it. All that mattered now was Su Yun's choice. From start to finish, Su Yun simply smiled calmly. To tell the truth, when it came to his lifespan, he was a little shaken. However, it was only for a moment before he calmed down. He'd long since prepared himself to face death. If he wanted to live, he wouldn't need to waste his lifespan like that. All he needed to do was cultivate step by step. Even if he couldn't live as long as the heavens, living 10,000 years wouldn't be a problem. Since he'd done that, it meant he didn't care at all. Su Yun chuckled and shook his head. Thank you for your kind intentions, but forget it. Brother Su, said Black Dragon, his expression shifting. Brother Su, there's no need to do this. Even if you really agreed, I, and even the entire demon race, wouldn't blame you. You've sacrificed too much for us. Li Min, he felt the same way. She truly loved Su Yun. She wanted to spend the rest of her life with him. The Yun, you... Forget it. Su Yun smiled and shook his head. There's no need. If I want to live, I don't need to rely on others. I know what I want. There's no need to try and persuade me otherwise. The demons remained expressionless. When Gu Li heard this, he smiled calmly. What a pity. In that case, I won't force you. But I wonder if we can form an alliance and kill these sanctimonious immortals before settling our personal grudges? Sure, nodded Su Yun. That's perfect. With that, Gu Li kicked Great Sage Sun, sending him flying into the horde of zombies. There's no point in keeping you alive. Go feed the zombies. Great Sage. The people of the Beast region knit their brows. It was impossible for them not to care about the Great Sage. When they'd seen the Great Sage's eyes go blind, their hearts ached. But for the sake of the bigger picture, they couldn't do anything. Now that the demons and Gu Li had come to an agreement, they might not be able to escape. In that case, they might as well. Chapter 900. In despair, the demons and Gu Li's forces surrounded the forces of the three realms. When they saw this scene, no matter who it was, they knew in their hearts that they couldn't escape. Their chances of breaking out of this encirclement were slim. Even if they succeeded, they'd suffer enormous losses. We can't leave, said one of the Beast region's elders. He stared directly at the blood-soaked warriors and said in a low voice, we might not be able to leave. Perhaps the only thing that awaits us is death, but our deaths should be more meaningful. That's right, said another elder. Another elder spoke up. We're the first batch of human warriors to resist the demon race and the zombie race. When we first arrived, we were already prepared to die. I just didn't expect it to happen so suddenly. Now, I just want to ask you, are you ready? Regardless of whether you're ready or not, I'll give you half a minute to do as you please. Once that time is up, your lives will no longer be your own." Everyone fell silent. Countless warriors closed their eyes. They didn't complain. Instead, they closed their eyes and recalled their most beautiful memories. Someone among the warriors suddenly roared, "For the future! For the future!" This roar caused all the warriors present to open their eyes. It was like a sudden clap of thunder, but for some reason, in this moment of despair, it ignited the flames in their hearts. Memories were beautiful. Every single one of them had beautiful memories they couldn't bear to part with. Yes, they could no longer go back. They might never see their loved ones again. They might never return to the place they dreamed of. But they could create a future for their loved ones. They could use their blood, their passion, to create a future for the people they wanted to protect. Retreat in defeat, or bravely face death. They'd rather choose the latter. Don't think for one second that they were just meat on the chopping block. Now that they were determined to fight to the death, they'd become a tough bone to chew. If they wanted to eat them, they'd have to at least knock out a few of their enemies' teeth. When the flames of despair were ignited, everyone's potential would be stimulated. For the sake of their determination, for the sake of everything they wanted to protect, they'd rather spill their blood all over the land. Kill. There was no organization. When someone took the lead and shouted this word, all the warriors in the field were ready for battle. Without any hesitation, they charged right into the encirclement of demons and zombies. There was no organization, no discipline, no clear battle plan, and no target to attack. At this moment, none of this mattered. What they needed to do was to kill the people who invaded their homes. Every time they killed someone, their chances of winning would increase. They would have a greater chance of protecting the future. Thousands of years later, when their descendants could still stand on this land and laugh, then everything would be worth it. At that time, perhaps their descendants would proudly tell those who came later, "My ancestors were heroes." Kill. Everyone's eyes were bloodshot. At this moment, they had already given up on defense and were attacking in a frenzy. It didn't matter if he was injured. These injuries were all embellishments for their heroic deeds in the future. So what if they were injured? The meaning of their existence now was to kill to their heart's content. Killing, too, was worth it. The tip of his nose twitched. After leaving the chaotic space, Yi Zichen and Gu Zichen reappeared in Maple City. Although the rain had washed away the stench of blood, they could still smell it from afar. As far as the eye could see, it was as if the entire world had been dyed red. Damn it! Yi Zichen cursed inwardly, then gritted his teeth and charged forward as fast as he could. Scram! At the same time, the Beast Region's elders rushed to the Great Sage's side. They brazenly attacked the horde of zombies. When they scattered all of the Great Sage's zombies. Great Sage! More than half of the Great Sage's flesh had been gnawed away. His left eye was pierced by a sword, and blood flowed freely from it. When he saw the Beast Elders land on him, for some reason, the bloody light in the Great Sage's eyes vanished. He laughed. "Great Sage, ol' son, actually fell for this illusion formation. Ol' son, I can't accept this." His enormous body shrunk non-stop. Before long, he returned to his original form. Of course, he wasn't a human. He was a humanoid monkey. When he returned to his original form, he was covered in pure white bones. Not a single part of his body was unharmed. His left and right sides were still blind. However, after he shrank, the sharp blade fell to the side. "Great Sage." The Beast Elder's eyes were grave. "I'll take you over to treat your injuries." Huh. To his surprise, the Great Sage laughed calmly. At that moment, the zombies swarmed towards them once more. When he saw how many zombies there were, the Beast Region Elder's scalp went numb. "Great Sage, let's go." This elder probably knew that if they brought the Great Sage along, they might all die in the hands of the zombies. But how could he possibly abandon the Great Sage? However, the instant he grabbed the Great Sage's arm, he felt a powerful force push him away. The Great Sage, all four of his limbs broken, struggled to his feet with his twisted legs. "Come to me." The Rui Jingu Bang pierced through countless zombies, then flew into the great sage's hands. Sweep! The great sage sent the zombies in front of him flying. Relying on his broken body, he withstood the onslaught of tens of thousands of zombies. Until he was truly exhausted. Bang! The Rui Jingu bang slammed into the ground, and the great sage leaned against it, a haughty smile on his face. Even if son die, I die standing. Come on, evildoers. Let me see just how fast you can eat. Is this your final counterattack before death? Ghoulie couldn't help but sneer at the warriors of the three realms, who were unafraid of death. He shook his head disdainfully, then turned his gaze to the great sage. Not bad, not bad. You've actually regained your senses. TCH, you really are the war god. Even after losing all 4 limbs, you're still so strong. Not bad, not bad. But you'll die anyway. Coincidentally, the great sage had already lost all his strength and was leaning against his staff. Tens of thousands of zombies stood in front of him, glaring at him like a tiger watching its prey. His fate was already set in stone. What a pity. The mythical figure I loved the most when I was young is going to die just like that. Just as he was about to turn around and avoid seeing the great sage's death, a fierce gust of wind blew past him. A person suddenly appeared in front of great sage Sun, exuding monstrous anger. Chapter 901. Flames of rage soared to the heavens like a comet. Yi Zichen appeared before the great sage. With a loud explosion, the zombies that had been charging at the great sage were all sent flying. Great sage. Without hesitation, Yi Zichen turned around. His eyes reddened at the shocking wounds. His flesh was mangled to the bone, and his limbs were twisted beyond recognition. His left eye was still bleeding, and his right eye was also showing signs of fatigue. You're here. When he heard Yi Zichen's voice, the great sage struggled to open his eyes. He grinned tiredly. I'm a little tired. Let me sleep for a while. With that, the great sage slumped against the Rui Jingu Bang and slumped to the ground. When he saw this, Yi Zichen hurriedly embraced him and called out his name over and over again. Great sage! I'm tired, tired, he muttered incessantly. But no matter how Yi Zichen called out, he received no response. Silly child. At that moment, a streak of rosy light appeared in the sky. A soft call came from the clouds, and before long, a beam of light landed on Great Sage Sun's body. The Great Sage disappeared into Yi Zichen's arms. Yi Zichen looked up. When he looked at the clouds, the rosy light had already disappeared, as if no one had ever appeared in the first place. He calmed his heart and focused. When that mysterious person first appeared, he'd spoken compassionately. That silly child had definitely been directed at the Great Sage. After that, he'd abducted the Great Sage. Presumably, he'd been trying to save him. Now that he'd made up his mind, Yi Zichen no longer worried about the mysterious person's identity. Instead, he turned his gaze to the battlefield outside Maple City. Was it tragic? That was probably the only word that could describe the current situation. As far as the eye could see, he saw the warriors of the three realms rushing into battle like moths to a flame. They were fearlessly fighting with all their might. The major powers of the Beast region and the Outer Immoral region were also exhausted from fighting the elite demons and zombies. As a result, they hadn't even noticed Yi Zichen's arrival. Right at this moment, he felt two auras appear on both sides and completely lock onto him. He looked around and saw Black Dragon and Ghoulie standing on either side of him, surrounding him. Brother Yi. The one who spoke was Ghoulie. He narrowed his eyes and smiled at Yi Zichen, his gaze filled with faint mockery. Brother Yi, who has always claimed to be the savior of the world, has come a little late. How you plan to end this mess now? Little boy Yi, you gave me quite a fright when you left. I've been here for an entire day. You've really helped me up. The Black Dragon snorted. Yi Zichen ignored them and subconsciously looked toward Su Yun. In the distance, Su Yun sat in a wrought-tan chair. There was no longer any life in him. Presently, he was like a candle in the wind, like a flame that was about to be extinguished. Even without the wind blowing on it, it could be extinguished at any time. As if sensing Yi Zichen's gaze, Su Yun turned his head and smiled at him, then looked away, refusing to meet his gaze. Brother Yi? Guli couldn't help but call out to him after a long while. Yi Zichen arched his brows indifferently. Brother Yi, there's no need to look at me like that. In truth, His Excellency Black Dragon deserves half of the credit for the current situation. I almost forgot to tell you, but His Excellency Black Dragon injured your big sister Lure so badly that she's no different from a cripple, said Guli playfully. Yi Zichen arched his brows. Before long, he saw Su Lu holding Yuan Hong in her arms. His pale face was devoid of any color, and his pitch-black pupils were filled with a lifeless emptiness. Yi Zichen's heart ached. Don't blame me. If it wasn't for your men killing Yuan Hong, I wouldn't have been able to kill him. If it weren't for your people killing Yuan Hong, the Fox clan head wouldn't have ended up like this, right? Great Sage Sun wouldn't have ended up like that. Also, you were the one who crippled Great Sage Sun's limbs, weren't you? I can't bear Emperor Ye's wrath alone. Don't even think about pushing all the blame onto us demons. Really? Guli laughed and scratched his head. I got here a bit late, so I don't know what happened up ahead. But since His Excellency Black Dragon put it that way, I won't deny it. But right now, in front of Brother Yi, we're the same. That's true, laughed Black Dragon. Huh, are you done talking? Yi Zichen stood between them and smiled calmly. He glanced at Gu Li and Black Dragon. When did you two learn how to do a double act? Do you have to be so animated? Brother, you don't be angry. You're a bit late, aren't you? We just wanted to help you sort out the situation, said Gu Li, still smiling playfully. Gu Li chuckled playfully. Brother Ye's wrath soars to the heavens. Shouldn't the two of us be clear about this matter? Then, we'll bear your wrath. That's right. We can't bear Emperor Ye's wrath alone. Yi Zichen clenched his fists. The two of them were clearly echoing each other to mock Yi Zichen. Their faces were filled with terror as they flaunted their accomplishments. Were they trying to provoke him? Yi Zichen had no choice but to admit they'd succeeded. Right now, he was really angry. He was so furious that even if he killed them, he might not be able to vent his anger. He slowly closed his eyes, and the image of the great sage leaning on the Rui Jingu Bang, facing off against tens of thousands of zombies, appeared in his mind. His twisted limbs, his blinded left eye, and his bone-deep wounds. Next, the scene changed to Su Lu. Her eyes were empty and lifeless, her face pale and bloodless. Yuan Hong lay in her arms, his chest pierced so viciously that he was barely bleeding. Finally, there was a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood. He saw soldiers dying one after another at the hands of demons and zombies. Even before they died, they'd used their last breaths to leave a mark on their enemies. All of this was deeply engraved in his heart. These scenes were like fuel for the anger in his heart, burning from a small flame to a blazing inferno. You're not bad. Yi Zichen's tone was indescribably calm. Could he say he didn't care? No, he cared a lot. Just because he was angry didn't mean he had to shout it out. Sometimes, silence was the best way to express his fury. Just like now. Oh no, oh no. Brother Yi, you're really angry, said Gu Li, still smiling playfully. Gu Li smiled playfully. Brother Yi, don't vent your anger on me. My weak body can't withstand a mighty deity like you. I can't either. Black dragons seemed to have been infected by Yi Zichen's bad taste. He feigned terror and sneered. Chapter 902. If it weren't for you, I'd almost forgotten. Brother Yi, you're really unkind. How could you attack me right off the bat? Gu Li, who was standing to Yi Zichen's right, took a few steps back, then tilted his head helplessly and sighed. You should be fighting Black Dragon. We're half from the same hometown, aren't we? Although he put on a relaxed expression, his heart could not help but tremble. He'd only barely dodged Yi Zichen's sudden punch. Even so, the wind from Yi Zichen's punch still stung his face. Oomph. So you really did inherit the master of the Three Realms power. Gu Li snorted sinisterly and looked straight ahead. But you're still going to die. Noisy. Yi Zichen glanced at him coolly, then attacked Gu Li without any hesitation. He'd done this after careful consideration. When he stood between Gu Li and Black Dragon clearly gave him a stronger sense of danger. Two fists were no match for four hands. If he fought both of them at the same time, he'd undoubtedly be at a disadvantage. He might as well go all out, kill Ghoulie, and then think about how to deal with Black Dragon. Now wasn't the time to be careless. He had to play it safe. Huh. With an explosive roar, Yi Zichen's eyes darkened, and he swung his fist once more without any flourish. Bang! However, this time, Ghoulie didn't dodge. Instead, he raised his right arm and took Yi Zichen's punch head-on. Hiss! When Yi Zichen's fist touched Ghoulie's arm, he couldn't help but gasp. What a strong body! Yi Zichen exclaimed inwardly, then hurriedly retreated. Brother Yi, you're making my heart ache, said Ghoulie, patting his arm. Then he looked at Yi Zichen in confusion. Why do you keep staring at me? Why don't you go fight Black Dragon instead? I can promise you that when you fight him, I absolutely won't ambush you. I can promise you that too. As soon as Ghoulie finished speaking, Black Dragon laughed magnanimously. You can settle your personal grudges. I absolutely won't interfere. Black Dragon wasn't lying. Don't be fooled by the fact that he and Ghoulie were just putting on a show, because Yi Zichen was their common enemy. However, Black Dragon could never forget his hatred for Ghoulie. If it weren't for the fact that Black Dragon hated Yi Zichen more than Ghoulie, they might already be working together to deal with Ghoulie. Ghoulie wasn't all that surprised by Black Dragon's response. Both of them were well aware of the relationship between them. He had never thought that Hei Long would actually help him. It was good enough that he didn't do anything behind her back, but he still said with a playful smile, Lord Black Dragon is really heartless. Same here. Hei Long remained unmoved. Soon after, he spread out his hands, took a few steps back, and said, Please continue. That's really sad news. Ghoulie rubbed his forehead, then sighed with a pained expression. Before long, he composed himself and said, Brother Yi, you punched me twice. Brother Yi hit me twice. It's impolite not to reciprocate. Brother Yi, be careful. He was polite and even told Yi Zichen to be careful. However, Ghoulie's attacks were especially crafty. Deafening booms filled the air, attracting the attention of the distant Beast region experts. After repelling the enemies around them and taking a breather, they looked over. That's probably Emperor Yi. When they heard this, practically everyone looked over. It really is Emperor Yi. After a few confirmations, the people of the Beast region and the Immortal region were all delighted. Then they heard someone shout, Emperor Yi is already on his way to help. Before long, even more allies will arrive. Everyone hold on. This shout was like a cardiac stimulant, filling the blood-soaked soldiers with even more vigor. For a moment, both the demons and zombies seemed to be on the verge of retreat. Emperor Yi, your appearance has been a great motivator, said Ghoulie. After a brief exchange of blows, Ghoulie and Yi Zichen separated. He looked down at the soldiers, who were breaking through as if on steroids. Yi Zichen remained silent. In response, Yi Zichen remained silent. He simply stared ahead, his nerves taut. Although the difference between them wasn't obvious, he could still sense it. If he'd absorbed the seal's energy, Ghoulie absolutely wouldn't have been a match for him. However, that little sword had absorbed it all. As expected, Gu Zichen stood in the air and watched the battle unfold. He couldn't help but frown. Just as he'd expected, Yi Zichen, who hadn't absorbed the seal's spiritual energy, was just a tiny bit away from Ghoulie. However, that tiny bit was absolutely fatal. After all, even Black Dragon, a demon, was eyeing Yi Zichen hungrily. He'd said he wouldn't intervene, but if he sensed Yi Zichen's true threat, how could he possibly stay out of this? The situation was dire. He couldn't do anything right now. More than 80% of his spiritual energy was focused on dealing with the God Realm old geezers. He couldn't leave. Creak. Off in the distance, Ghoulie cracked his neck. He'd already sensed the difference between him and Yi Zichen. Brother Yi, why are your hands shaking? A playful smile tugged at Ghoulie's lips. He stretched lazily, and with a whoosh, a pair of gray wings unfurled from his back. You're their savior right now. If you lose, they'll fall into despair. Don't you think so? That said, I just love seeing people fall into despair. That look of hope on the verge of despair. It's the most beautiful thing. Rumble. His wings instantly unfurled, and his skin turned from wheat to bronze. His gray eyes were filled with a faint arrogance as he narrowed his eyes. Then he narrowed his eyes and said, "It's about time I took back some things." Whoosh! Suddenly, Ghoulie disappeared from Yi Zichen's line of sight. Even Black Dragon, who'd been watching from the sidelines, couldn't help but feel his heart skip a beat. Surprisingly, he couldn't find Ghoulie. Yi Zichen remained in place, but his eyes were closed. When Black Dragon saw this, he was astonished. Had he given up? Based on his understanding of Yi Zichen, he was absolutely not that kind of person. So why had he sensed that Yi Zichen was using his spiritual awareness to locate Ghoulie? Die! At that moment, the invisible Ghoulie suddenly appeared behind Yi Zichen. He was close, so close that he had no chance of dodging. Bang! Boom! In the time it took for a spark to fly off of a flint, Ghoulie, who'd held the absolute advantage, crashed to the ground. When he looked at Yi Zichen, he saw a pair of snow-white wings unfurling from his back. Chapter 903. Boom! Boom! Ghoulie slammed into the ground, pain racking his chest. He couldn't help but cough up a mouthful of blood. He stared wide-eyed at Yi Zichen, who stood in the sky. Yi Zichen's snow-white wings flapped back and forth behind him. Yi Zichen crossed his arms and looked back at him coldly. At that moment, the thick, ink-black clouds drifted away, revealing a ray of light that illuminated the earth. An angel. Right now, Yi Zichen was like an angel often mentioned in books. He stood proudly in the sky, bathed in sunlight. Wings. Gu Zichen couldn't help but arch his brows. He naturally knew that Yi Zichen had the bloodline of a holy demon, and he also knew that he had wings. He also knew that his wings would grow in the future. But these wings had to first appear when Yi Zichen ascended to divinity. If history hadn't changed, then Yi Zichen had condensed his wings when he ascended. However, during divine bestowal, his godhead shattered, and his wings disappeared. By the time he reformed his wings, it was time for his second divine bestowal. Wait! Up in the clouds, Gu Zichen suddenly frowned. Back in the primal chaos, Gu Zichen's shattered godhead had absorbed the spiritual power of the seal. Could it be that the seal's power had completely healed his godhead? The pair of angel wings condensed again. If that was the case, then everything could change for the better. However, if he'd succeeded in condensing his godhead, Yi Zichen shouldn't have been at a disadvantage against Ghoulie. It's true. If you hadn't revealed your wings, I really might have forgotten about them. Yi Zichen looked down coldly at Ghoulie and said, "I hate these wings." It's as if their appearance is a declaration that the blood of demons runs through my veins. I hate demons, so I rarely use them. I've practically abandoned them. But now isn't the time to care about that, is it? Yi Zichen slowly walked up to Ghoulie. With every step he took, ripples spread through the sky, and feathers of light fell from his wings. Thank you for reminding me of such a trump card, but your sins are unforgivable. Ha! Ha ha! Ghoulie, who was lying on the ground, suddenly laughed. He wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, then flapped his wings and soared into the sky, landing 100 meters away from Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen and Ghoulie gazed at each other from afar. The wings on their backs seemed to represent angels, demons. He had to admit that the two of them were fated rivals. From the beginning of the modern world to the recognition of their respective reincarnations, even their current wings, it was also the opposite of black and white. That punch just now really hurt. Ghoulie rubbed his chest, then stretched lazily. I just won one round. What's there to be proud of? In the end, you'll still die. Really? Yi Zichen's emotions didn't fluctuate in the slightest. He was neither happy, nor sad, nor angry, nor smiling. Well, once we try. With that, Ghoulie, who was 100 meters away, vanished. After a brief pause, Yi Zichen flapped his wings and followed. Boom, boom, boom. The two of them exchanged blows far too quickly. No one present could keep track of what was going on. There were only two people who could see it clearly: Black Dragon and Gu Zichen. In the space of a few breaths, Yi Zichen and Ghoulie exchanged no less than 100 blows. Their fists met. Boom! They separated. Yi Zichen leapt backwards, and Ghoulie did the same. However, his right arm was trembling uncontrollably. When their fists collided, his arm had actually been broken. I don't believe it. Ghoulie's injured right arm trembled slightly. He did his best to conceal the injury as he stared intently at Yi Zichen, who was still expressionless. He refused to believe that just because he'd grown a pair of wings, Yi Zichen was so much stronger than him. He refused to believe it, so he charged forward once more. Bang! His left arm shattered. Ghoulie's arms hung limply by his sides. His eyes were bloodshot. "You're no match for me." Yi Zichen looked at him coldly and snorted. "You broke the great sage's 4 limbs, right? Then I'll break your entire body." "Ridiculous." Ghoulie laughed sinisterly. Then purple mist began to emanate from his body. He'd fallen. "I haven't lost yet." Ghoulie roared, his expression dark. After his transformation, his skin turned purplish black, and a thick, pungent purple mist rose around him. When he saw this, Yi Zichen's eyelids twitched. He was well aware of the fallen's regenerative abilities. Yi Zichen's wings flapped slightly, and he shot forward like a cannonball. "Oomph!" Ghoulie snorted coldly. When he saw Yi Zichen charging towards him, he grinned. "Come on." Without hesitation, he punched out, but Yi Zichen, who was just about to meet his fist, suddenly disappeared. He reappeared behind Ghoulie, stepped on his back, and slammed him into the ground. Boom! His foot landed. Every bone in his back broke. However, before long, his sunken back healed and reformed. "Your regenerative abilities?" "Back then, your regenerative abilities hurt you pretty badly. Are you sure you want to use them again?" "Heal." In a fight of the same level, it was like a bug. However, in the face of absolute strength, it only increased his enemy's pain. Bang! He crushed Ghoulie's back with another stomp. Before long, it healed again. Yi Zichen, the zombie progenitors, sensed the danger Ghoulie was in and wanted to help him. "You're right," Ghoulie snarled darkly. "Stop them. Even if we die, we can't let them disturb Emperor Yi." When they saw that Yi Zichen had the upper hand, the major powers of the Beast region and the Outer Immortal region went all out. They knew they weren't a match for the zombie progenitors, but they still had to stop them. So long as Emperor Yi could free up his hands, they could turn the tables. Yi Zichen's display of strength was an incredible boost to the blood-soaked warriors. For a moment, their morale soared. Break the great sage's limbs. Make Big Sister Lu sad. Make Yuan Hong's life or death uncertain. With every word Yi Zichen said, he crushed every bone in Ghoulie's body, then waited for them to heal before crushing them again. Ghoulie, who was still under his foot, gnashed his teeth and said nothing. "You're not saying anything, but you seem much more unyielding than before. Forget it. Just die." After he'd had enough of him, Yi Zichen lost interest in him. He raised his foot and stomped down hard on Ghoulie's head. Chapter 904. 2 fists are no match for 4 hands. Aren't you going to make a move? A thunderous roar reverberated in Black Dragon's ears. He naturally saw Ghoulie's miserable state. He'd had the upper hand, but after Yi Zichen sprouted his wings, he'd been suppressed to this extent. It was no wonder that the abyssals of the demon race were all experts. The enhancement of the wings was simply too great. However, he hadn't attacked immediately because of his hesitation. He wanted Ghoulie dead. Perhaps only he knew how deep Black Dragon's hatred for Ghoulie ran. Even the demons who'd lost their homes to him couldn't empathize with him. He hated Ghoulie too much. During the past half-year, he'd practically spent every day and night thinking about Ghoulie's playful smile and how he'd been forced to leave helplessly. He was the commander of the devil race, the king of the devil race. The subspace of the demon race used to be his royal land. The land that he had controlled for tens of thousands of years had been snatched away by this brat. This was a slap to his face. It also served as a foil to his incompetence. If he died here, would everything be over? The knot in his heart might have eased at this moment, but after a brief hesitation, he still chose to act. As Yi Zichen punched out, he suddenly sensed a dangerous aura rushing in his direction. He forcefully retracted the fist that was about to land. He could feel that if his fist landed, he would definitely be seriously injured. With a flap of his wings, he retreated rapidly. Boom! That was close. The place where he retreated was coincidentally at the edge of the black dragon's attack range. He didn't even have a chance to catch his breath before he saw a group of demonic palms suddenly emerge from the ground where he had been standing. In the end, we still cooperated. Yi Zichen furrowed his brows. Even though he could feel his body brimming with energy, he couldn't help it. However, he still needed to be careful when facing these two people. Moreover, the black dragon really gave him a very dangerous feeling. You came just in time. Gu Li, who was lying on the ground, stood up on his own. He naturally didn't think that Black Dragon would be so kind as to help him up. The two of them didn't seem to have such a harmonious relationship. Black Dragon, who had attacked him, was standing a few meters away from him, but he had never once looked at him. Don't be like that. Since you chose to save me, we're in the same boat. You also feel threatened by Yi Zichen, right? He nodded lightly. Black Dragon absolutely didn't want to save Gu Li, but now that 4 pairs of wings had appeared, Black Dragon could sense a deep threat from Yi Zichen. He naturally didn't doubt that he wasn't a match for him. However, he didn't want to cause too much trouble. To be on the safe side, it was best to save Gu Li and deal with Yi Zichen together. As expected, the demon race doesn't keep their promises. Yi Zichen said coolly. He naturally didn't doubt that Black Dragon would remain uninvolved. He'd long since anticipated this outcome. Therefore, he had nothing to be angry about. He was very calm. Black Dragon didn't say anything. He just calmly stared ahead. Their silence caused the atmosphere around them to grow even heavier. Yi Zichen's nerves were taut as well. He stared over their shoulders and vigilantly observed everything. Swoosh. Vanish. After a brief moment of silence, Gu Li suddenly vanished into thin air. By his side, Black Dragon's eyes narrowed into slits. His arms and cheeks were covered in scales. The two of them must have discussed this during their brief silence. Right now, the enemy was in the shadows, while he was in the open. Yi Zichen looked around, then, he turned around and kicked at his back. The instant he turned around, Black Dragon transformed into a streak of light and launched an attack at him. Boom, boom, boom. Explosions filled the sky once more. As far as the eye could see, several beams of light clashed against each other. As they collided, they produced motes of light. Below them, the various races were also fighting each other, but the beast region was clearly at a disadvantage. Ordinary soldiers were full of vigor. They charged forward relentlessly, as if they'd been injected with chicken blood. However, in terms of peak combat strength, the 12 demon sovereigns and the 4 zombie progenitors weren't existences the beast region's experts could stand up to. Even though they were already fighting 2 against 1, especially against the demon sovereigns, they were 5 against 1. They were still in a disadvantageous position. However, they gritted their teeth and endured, so long as they could hold on for a while. Regardless of whether Emperor Yi took action or if reinforcements arrived, they still had a chance to survive. Up in the sky, Black Dragon's scale-covered right arm was as thick as a tree trunk. The veins on his arm bulged. They crawled up and down his arm like bugs. His face was twisted with savagery. Die. Not good. Yi Zichen had just knocked Gu Li back when he suddenly sensed danger behind him. However, he knew it was too late to dodge. In an instant, he made the best decision. He turned around. He crossed his arms and took the blow head-on. Bang! The instant Black Dragon's fist collided with Yi Zichen's arms, he was sent flying like a cannonball. Emperor Yi, when they saw this, the hearts of the beast region and 3 realms trembled. However, when experts fought, everything happened in the blink of an eye. Their brief pause gave their opponents the perfect opportunity. Cough! At practically the same time, several experts from the beast region and 3 realms coughed up blood and crashed to the ground. Their injuries also affected the blood-soaked warriors fighting on the front lines. Whoosh! Their heads fell to the ground or were devoured by the zombies. It was like a butterfly effect. One side affected the other. It seems my arm is useless now. Yi Zichen crawled out of the crater. His right arm hung limply by his side as he brushed the dust off his body with his left hand. Black Dragon's previous attack had been particularly deadly. The instant his fist landed on his arm, Yi Zichen retreated at top speed and used the recoil to absorb some of the force. Even so, his right arm had been broken. There was no way for it to heal in a short period of time. As expected, two fists were no match for four hands. During their exchange, just now, Yi Zichen had sensed that, in a one-on-one fight, he might stand a chance. However, the two of them had attacked him at the same time. He was exhausted and mentally exhausted. Furthermore, at their level, even if they'd never worked together before, as soon as one of them attacked, the other would know what to do. Since neither side had any openings, Yi Zichen's situation was truly unbearable. Furthermore, he sensed that their experts weren't as strong as the demons and zombies. Now that his right arm was injured, he was even less of a match for Gu Li and Black Dragon. But now, Chapter 905. An ambush. Yi Zichen licked his lips and slowly took a few steps forward. Retreating was inevitable, but he needed to delay Gu Li and Black Dragon. Whoosh! He flapped his wings and landed in the sky. Black Dragon and Gu Li simply stood in the sky, as if waiting for him to return. At that moment, Gu Li's gaze fell upon Yi Zichen's right arm. It was twisted and hung limply by his side. "Emperor Yi, you're injured?" Yi Zichen smiled calmly. "Emperor Yi, are you envious of my self-healing abilities now?" Gu Li pursed his lips and laughed teasingly. "At our level of physical strength, it'll take at least 3 to 5 days for your arm to heal. Even when you weren't injured, Emperor Yi struggled so much. So, are you thinking of running now?" Gu Li's fingers trembled. When he saw this, he pursed his lips into a smile. "It seems I hit the nail on the head. But perhaps it wasn't very nice of me to say running. How could Emperor Yi possibly run? You're probably making a strategic retreat, right? You're thinking of the bigger picture, right? Do you remember what I told you a long time ago?" Yi Zichen, who'd been silent all this time, suddenly spoke up. "What did you say?" laughed Gu Li. "Die from talking too much," sneered Yi Zichen. "That's exactly what I'm talking about." Gu Li's expression froze, but before long, he returned to his habitual playful expression. "Die from talking too much?" Yi Zichen loved mocking his enemies when they were in despair. He was willing to give his enemies hope, then make them despair. Perhaps this really was a bad habit, but he loved it. "But I've never died before." Black Dragon glanced at him coolly. To tell the truth, he was rather annoyed by Gu Li's attitude. When he was about to die, he was as cowardly as a coward. Now that he had the upper hand, he was smug. Black Dragon truly wondered how someone like him could live for so long. Yi Zichen didn't pay much attention to Gu Li's response. He simply smiled calmly. "Just remember what I said," Yi Zichen said. "Oh, Emperor Yi, do you have a backup plan? I'm really scared. But now that your arm is crippled, what can you do to me?" Yi Zichen couldn't be bothered with him. He rolled his eyes, then spread out his spiritual awareness. "City Lord Luo." Yi Zichen's transmission rang out in Luo Wei's sea of consciousness as he treated the injured Beast Region Elder. He subconsciously glanced in Yi Zichen's direction, only to hear Yi Zichen transmit back, "Don't look at me." Upon receiving such a response, Luo Wei's expression turned cold. "Emperor Yi, what's wrong? I saw you just now. Are you hurt?" "You don't have to worry about my situation here. I can handle it myself." "What's the situation on your side?" transmitted Yi Zichen. "The situation is not optimistic." Luo Wei frowned as he looked at the injured people around him, as well as the ones who could still fight but had suffered quite a few light injuries. "The demons and zombies are too strong. Even though we've made preparations, we've still underestimated them. Moreover, we were only prepared to fight against the devils at that time. Now that there are so many zombies, we're somewhat unprepared." Even though Luo Wei's voice transmission hadn't mentioned how severely injured they were, it was clear from his words that they couldn't hold on much longer. "Withdraw all our men. Later, I will create an opening in the northwest. You will break out from there." "All right." Luo Wei said no more. He was keenly aware of how dire the situation was and how precious time was. Since Emperor Yi had chosen to have them retreat, there was no need for him to know the reason. All he had to do was do as he was told. "Emperor Yi, you've explained everything clearly, right?" At that moment, the talkative Gu Li spoke up once more. "Let me think. Where will you have them retreat from? The valley of death is to the east. Going there will only lead to certain death. The south is my main base of operations. If we go there, we'll just have to go back. The demons are to the west. It's unlikely that they'll retreat directly to the north. The northwest, then, he'd actually seen through them. Although Yi Zichen's heart was filled with astonishment, his expression didn't change in the slightest. He just smiled faintly, spread his hands, and chuckled. Who knows? However, the moment he finished speaking, tens of thousands of sword lights suddenly appeared behind him and shot out in the northwest direction. Now, Luo Wei had been waiting for Yi Zichen's signal. When he saw the tens of thousands of illusory swords, he roared at his soldiers. Now is the time. Retreat. The soldiers of the Beast region and the Immortal region fled northwest. The demon elites tried to stop them, but Yi Zichen's tens of thousands of swords killed them all. There were no obstacles along the way, but it was only temporary. Yi Zichen had said that he could only open a small opening. Before long, the demons would fill in the gap. Whether or not Luo Wei and the others could break through would depend on themselves. You hit the nail on the head. Just as Yi Zichen's sword descended, Gu Li's lips curved into a smile. So what if I hit the nail on the head? Yi Zichen laughed coldly, then unleashed his majestic aura. His eyes locked onto Gu Li and Black Dragon. With me here, don't even think of leaving. Especially your excellency, Black Dragon. I killed so many of your demons, so don't blame me. To his surprise, Yi Zichen thought Black Dragon would glare at him in fury, but to his surprise, his expression didn't change in the slightest. When he looked at Gu Li, he smiled playfully and crossed his arms, looking completely unafraid. Yi Zichen looked northwest. No one was guarding it. After his swords slaughtered the demons, no one had gone to guard that area. Did they want to let Luo Wei and the others leave? Absolutely not. Something was definitely wrong. That place, it was a trap. Emperor Yi, Emperor Yi, I really don't know what you're thinking. I already pointed it out to you. You're going to break through to the northwest. Since I figured that out, did you really think I wouldn't set up a trap there? At that moment, Gu Li sighed and shook his head. Thank you. You told them to run northwest and caught them all in one fell swoop. I just don't know how much they'll hate you. You're the one who pushed them into the bottomless abyss. What? Yi Zichen's expression shook. He looked to the northwest, where no one was guarding. Suddenly, a horde of twisted zombies appeared. Standing in front of them were the 4 zombie progenitors, as well as the 2 Zhao brothers, who held command medallions. Chapter 906. Chapter 906, Exhaustion and Ambush. Luo Wei, who was leading the way, could vaguely make out a group of people at the end of the path. Everyone stopped. Before long, they saw the 4 zombie progenitors and the Zhao brothers, leading an immeasurable number of blood zombies in front of them. It's the blood zombies, someone in the crowd said. Then, they heard even more despairing news. The demons have blocked off the path behind us. Being surrounded like dumplings, this situation was a little different from before. Previously, the space was vast. Even if they were completely surrounded, they'd still have room to move around. But now, in this cramped space that could only wait for death, this was true despair. Some of them could no longer hold back their emotions. They knelt on the ground, clutching their heads in their hands. They were hot-blooded and fearless in the face of death. So why was it that when they'd prepared everything, they'd been given hope? Now, they were faced with despair. They really couldn't hold on any longer. When someone knelt on the ground and clutched their heads, it was almost contagious. More and more people knelt on the ground. At first glance, it looked like they were harvesting wheat. They all knelt on the ground. All of you stand up. All of you stand up. Luo Wei roared. He naturally knew just how hopeless the situation was. But did despair mean they were just going to wait for death? He really was a powerhouse. Even among the elders of the Beast region and the Immortal region, he was one of the strongest. But he was still an individual. If they wanted to break out of the encirclement, the chances were slim. But if they really wanted to, they'd have to work together as one. All of you stand up. What are you doing? Luo Wei stood in the sky and roared. Do you really want to kneel here and wait for death? Cowards! Don't you remember what we said at the beginning? Where'd your hot-bloodedness go? They remained unmoved. Of course they'd been hot-blooded, but now that they'd been extinguished, how were they supposed to rekindle it? They'd burned out. It was clear from their eyes that their hearts had crumbled. They knelt on the ground, trembling, ignoring Luo Wei's words. Luo Wei couldn't help but sigh. In truth, he understood, but understanding was one thing. But he couldn't let them kneel here and wait for death just because he understood. Think about your children. Think about the people you want to protect. If your blood has run out, then burn your lives. Actually, Luo Wei didn't want to say this, so he sounded very gloomy when he said it. To be honest, was he in despair? He was also in despair. Emperor Yi transmitted to him, telling him to open an opening for him and let them retreat. To tell the truth, if it weren't for Emperor Ye's transmission, perhaps even if they died, they'd be able to straighten their backs and meet their deaths. But Emperor Yi had ordered them to retreat, giving them a chance to live. But the result was the same. Blame Emperor Yi? He couldn't be blamed for that. After all, he had good intentions and good intentions. It was just that the people on the other side were more calculating than they were. The first spurt of energy, the second weak, and the third exhausted. They were really tired. Now, Luo Wei could only bring up the topic of his children to raise everyone's spirits. As for the result, leave it to fate. As expected, mentioning his children was effective. The kneeling soldiers rose to their feet, raised their weapons, and readied themselves for battle. However, there was no longer any trace of their previous fearlessness on their faces. Fight to the bitter end? If he could kill as many as he could, then he would. If he couldn't, then he would die. His Excellency Gu Li's foresight is truly divine. You actually predicted this path, said Hamba, blocking Luo Wei's path. Hitorigami, one of the zombie progenitors blocking Luo Wei's path, smiled mockingly. Look at these pitiful worms. They've already lost all hope for the future. Zhao Zizhao. At that moment, a delicate shout rang out from the crowd. Lin Shihe, covered in blood, walked out of the crowd. Her almond-shaped eyes brimmed with indescribable emotion as she glared at Zhao Zizhao, who stood in front of the zombies. What are you shouting for? You're quite pretty, but I hate beautiful women the most. A sinister light flashed through Hamba's eyes. As soon as she finished speaking, she was just about to attack when a figure blocked her path. Calm down. Hamba frowned at the man and snorted. Who are you? How dare you stand in my way? Right? Are you one of our soldiers? This humble one is Zhao Zizhao, said Zhao Zizhao, bowing. Zhao Zizhao. Hamba arched her brows. Gu Li introduced this kid to us. I returned his command medallion to him, explained Ho Qing. I see. Hamba nodded. Just now, I think that woman called out Zhao Zizhao's name as well. Could it be you? That's me, said Zhao Zizhao with an embarrassed smile. Please calm down, Your Excellency. Let this humble one handle everything. Go on. Hamba didn't dare attack someone Gu Li had introduced. Zhao Zizhao smiled at her and nodded, then turned to face Lin Shihe. He couldn't help but frown at the sight of her blood. To tell the truth, he loved her. Shihe, you don't deserve to call me that. Lin Shihe glared at Zhao Zizhao and gnashed her teeth. I was really stupid. To think I trusted you so much all this time. I never would have guessed that not only were you involved with demons, but you were also involved with them. Zhao Zizhao, you're really something. What do you know? Roared Zhao Zizhao. I admit that I really don't know anything, nodded Lin Shihe. Lin Shihe nodded. If I had known everything, I wouldn't have fallen for a despicable person like you. As soon as she finished speaking, Lin Shihe couldn't help but frown and touch her belly. Zhao Zizhao couldn't help but arch his brows. Then he glanced at her belly. You. It has nothing to do with you, said Lin Shihe angrily. Whoosh. He let out a long sigh. Fine, you can pretend it has nothing to do with me, but I can't. Don't say I don't care about our past relationship. I'll give you a chance. If you want, I can let you leave. Then what about the people behind me? What about my subordinates? They can't leave, said Zhao Zizhao, his expression tense. Zhao Zizhao said with a straight face, they must stay here. Letting you go is already my bottom line. Bottom line? Sneered Lin Shihe. What a bottom line. Zhao Zizhao, did a dog eat all your conscience? Say whatever you want. roared Zhao Zizhao. I'll say it one last time. Are you going to leave or not? If you don't, I'll kill you too. Lin Shihe took a step back, her face incomparably pale. Then she laughed heartily. Chapter 907. Be obedient. She didn't say another word. In fact, she didn't even spare them another glance. She turned around and walked back to the center of the group. There was no need to say anything else. When Zhao Zizhao said those words, the last bit of nostalgia in his heart had also disappeared. Zhao Zizhao couldn't help but clench his fists as he watched Lin Shihe's bleak figure. Then he relaxed and heaved a sigh of relief. That's settled then. He retreated to the zombie progenitor's side. Lin Shihe's lack of appreciation made him feel very embarrassed. He wanted to ridicule the other party's childishness, but for some reason, he still felt a little sour in his heart. The other zombie progenitors didn't even look at him, but Hitorigami chuckled with interest. You want to let her go, but it seems like she doesn't appreciate it. I wonder how you, the Commander Seal, are going to deal with these eyesores. Lord Hamba, you're being too serious. How could this lowly one dare to let you address me respectfully? Zhao Zizhao composed himself, then smiled apologetically and bowed. Your Excellency, Guli thinks highly of this lowly one and handed this seal to me. But compared to you lords, what I've done is nothing. At most, I'm just a manservant leading the troops. The power is still in your hands, isn't it? Zhao Zizhao had no choice but to lower his stance. Although the military power was now in his hands, as a general, he was very clear. In the face of absolute strength, even the Commander Seal was useless in his hands. Even though the appearance of the dragon vein had greatly increased his strength, but against the zombie progenitor, he was still nothing more than an ant. It wasn't easy for him to reach this step, so he had to be even more cautious and live as if he was treading on thin ice. His words and behavior made the zombie progenitors feel very comfortable. The zombie progenitors, who had originally disliked the Commander Seal, looked at him warmly. Hitorigami even smiled and patted him on the shoulder. You have a good eye. The zombie progenitor was a force of nature. Even though Hamba hadn't used too much force when he smacked Zhao Zizhao, ordinary Sky Immortals would have been hard-pressed to take it. He gritted his teeth and endured the pain in his shoulder, but the corners of his mouth still curved into a warm and humble smile. Tell me the truth. Not bad, not bad. You are worth teaching. He patted Zhao Zizhao's shoulder again. Zhao Zizhao forced a smile and nodded repeatedly. When Lin Shihe saw this, she couldn't help but smile self-deprecatingly. When the sect-master of the 100 Flowers Gate saw this, he sighed and patted her shoulder in consolation. Back then, Lin Shihe and Zhao Zizhao had caused an uproar. In the face of such a setback, anyone would be sad. When Hamba finally withdrew his hand, Zhao Zizhao secretly channeled his spiritual energy on his shoulder. His face was filled with a humble smile. My lords, what do you think we should do? Brother Jianshan, what do you think? Hamba and the others all looked at Jianshan. When he saw the expressions of the people around him, he said, Don't worry, you'll be fine. His Excellency Gu Li ordered us not to leave anyone alive, so we naturally have to carry out the mission. However, I don't know if we should keep the woman who has some relationship with Brother Zhao. All of the zombie progenitors' gazes landed on Zhao Zizhao. Sensing their gazes, the pressure on Zhao Zizhao multiplied. He glanced vaguely at Lin Shihe, only to discover that she was also looking at him. Their eyes met for a brief moment before he withdrew his gaze and gritted his teeth. If it's possible, please be magnanimous. It's not like I'm being merciful. Jiangchun narrowed his eyes. Brother Zhao is one of Gu Li's men, which means we're family. If you want to protect someone, it's not a big deal. It's as easy as lifting a finger. Not to mention that she's carrying Brother Zhao's flesh and blood. Ho Qing said with a smile. I'm sorry for the trouble I've caused you all. Zhao Zizhao cupped his hands towards them. However, for some reason, although the zombie progenitors were being polite, Zhao Zizhao sensed that Jiangshan and the others didn't look too happy. Forget it. Even if they didn't want to do this, Lin Shihe had to stay. Not only for her, but also for the children in her belly. Brother Zhao, you're too polite. Jiangchen reached out and pulled him back. Then, his black eyes flashed with a gloomy light. So, Brother Zhao, do you think we should make our move? I'll listen to your commands, said Zhao Zizhao, taking a step back and bowing. Then, let's do it. Jiangchen didn't refuse. He narrowed his eyes, his tone sinister. Kill. They're moving. Just as the zombies began to move, someone from the Three Realms spoke up. Right at this moment, another person shouted explosively. The demon's grandson is moving as well. They're here. Luo Wei took a deep breath as he hovered in the air. His eyes were filled with malice as he stared at the demon and blood zombie forces that were constantly advancing towards them. There's no other way out. For the sake of your children, for the sake of your loved ones, for the sake of their futures. Kill. As soon as Luo Wei finished speaking, the Three Realm side let out a deafening roar and charged at the blood zombies and demons. Umph. Yi Zichen, who'd been watching this entire time, snorted coldly. He prepared to flash away and rush to their aid. He had no choice but to go. He'd sent Luo Wei a transmission to pick a path of retreat. Now, however, they were in even more danger than before. He had to take full responsibility. It was his error of judgment that had plunged the Three Realms into this predicament. In order to make up for this mistake, he had to go and help. However, at that moment, an illusory figure appeared before him, then solidified. Brother Yi, you can't go. The black figure was none other than Gu Li. He arched his brows and snorted. Stay here and enjoy the view. Isn't that great? Get out of my way. Yi Zichen deliberately suppressed his anger, but his gaze was filled with menace as he looked ahead. Brother Yi, are you threatening me? Gu Li laughed sinisterly, then glanced at Yi Zichen's right hand. Brother Yi, aren't you a bit too confident in your current state? As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Zichen sensed Black Dragon appear behind him. The two auras completely sealed him off, and an invisible sense of oppression spread through the void. Be good and stay here, sneered Gu Li. Gu Li sneered. That's if you still want to live, or if you still want her to live. Suddenly, a woman with closed eyes appeared in Gu Li's hands. Chapter 908. Eternal Life, Eternal Reincarnation, Beast Dao, Su Yin. When Yi Zichen saw the woman in Gu Li's hands, he saw that her eyes were closed, and she wasn't struggling at all. However, her vitality was still quite strong. It was obvious that Gu Li had used some sort of method to knock her out. Yi Zichen instantly froze. He fell silent. Then his eyes filled with veins of blood. Let her go. Yi Zichen stared intently at Gu Li, then spoke in a deep, somber voice. Under this kind of silence, anyone could feel the irritable and uneasy emotions in his heart, as well as the palpitating sense of crisis. Hey! Gu Li simply smiled calmly, then grabbed Su Yan's head and let her fall into the sky. Don't! When he saw Gu Li's actions, Yi Zichen's eyelids twitched. He reached out to stop him. Don't worry, Brother Yi. How could I possibly do anything to her? She's Brother Ye's woman. I'm well aware of that. Gu Li withdrew his hand playfully and let Su Yin float above the clouds. I just invited her over to calm you down. You're far too irritable right now. When he saw Su Yin return to the clouds, Yi Zichen let out a long sigh of relief. He glared at Su Yin several times, then turned to Gu Li and said, What exactly do you want? I don't want anything. Gu Li shrugged helplessly. I just saw that Brother Yi was injured. What's more, it's not good to keep fighting. Why can't we just stand here and watch for a while? Let's have a good chat. Little did they know, at that very moment, a fiery red shadow hurtled towards them. Its target was Su Yin. TCH, TCH, TCH. You want to steal her right in front of me? Gu Li sneered, then moved. He swept out with his right leg, then clenched his left hand into a fist and punched the red shadow. Humph! When he saw that the newcomer was taking his attack head-on, a sinister light flashed through Gu Li's eyes. You're seeking death. With that, Gu Li no longer held back. He transformed into a beam of light and tangled with the shadow. This is my chance. As he watched Gu Li leave, for some reason, Yi Zichen suddenly had this thought. He vaguely glanced at Su Yin. The two of them were only a few dozen meters apart. As long as he willed it, he could cross this distance in an instant. Then he could bend down and carry her away. The entire process took about 3 breaths of time. Black Dragon was about 100 meters away from him, but his aura had been locked onto him the entire time. Perhaps he would stop him the instant he picked Su Yin up. I have to try. Yi Zichen steeled his heart and prepared to attack. However, just as his feet moved slightly, he sensed that Black Dragon had already locked onto him. Furthermore, Black Dragon had already arrived in front of Su Yin and was staring at him coldly with dark eyes. Emperor Yi, what are you trying to do? Black Dragon lowered his head and looked at Su Yin, who was lying in the clouds. You want to save her? Could this be the so-called heroes have a weakness for the charms of a beautiful woman? She was just a woman. Why did Emperor Yi care so much? Just now, if Emperor Yi wanted to leave, I'm telling the truth. I don't think I could stop you on my own, but you want to save her? Huh? So you're saying you want to let me go? Black Dragon was already by Su Yan's side. Even if Yi Zichen wanted to save her, there was no way he could. He deliberately put on a playful expression and looked at Black Dragon, only to see Black Dragon looking back at him even more playfully. That doesn't seem very likely. As soon as he finished speaking, Gu Li, who'd gone out to deal with the Red Shadow, returned. When he returned, he was holding a 9-tailed fox in his hands. Here comes another one. Slap. He casually tossed the 9-tailed fox to Su Yan's side, then looked over. Big Sister Luer, Yi Zichen, what the hell are you doing? Su Lu, roared as soon as she landed. Shut up. Gu Li frowned and slapped Su Lu across the face, so hard that blood trickled from the corners of her mouth. How could a beast like you possibly understand Emperor Ye's thoughts? How dare you yell at Emperor Yi? It seems to me you're tired of living. As he spoke, Gu Li was just about to attack again when Yi Zichen instantly shouted, Stop! Stay your hand. Gu Li's hand stopped in midair. He put on a confused expression and said, Brother Yi, why are you stopping me? You have an exalted status, and she's nothing but a beast from the beast region. How dare she yell at you? I'm helping you discipline her, aren't I? If you dare say another word about her, you'll die. A sinister aura emanated from Yi Zichen's body. After a brief moment of shock, Gu Li's lips twitched into a smile. Brother Yi, are you threatening me? As they spoke, Su Lu sat paralyzed on the ground. She sensed that their attention was on Yi Zichen. Although she was incredibly weak, her eyes were bloodshot. Without a second thought, she grabbed Su Yin and fled. Did I say you could leave? Gu Li, who was in the middle of talking to Yi Zichen, reached out with his right hand. Su Lu, who was just about to flee, couldn't take even a single step forward. I spared your life because you're pretty, but why can't you just be a good girl and listen to me? Gu Li's feminine voice grew closer and closer. Su Lu could sense the danger in his voice. She tightly hugged Su Yin in her arms. She couldn't lose him again. She'd already lost Yuan Hong. If she lost Su Yin, she'd lose the entire world. You're not a good girl. He grabbed Su Lu's long hair and forcefully dragged her back. Su Lu gnashed her teeth and didn't make a sound. However, her eyes were bloodshot, and they looked even more demonic. Can't you just stay here and be a pet? You want to run? You want to take someone else with you? Bang! He kicked Su Lu in the back. She was already weak, so she coughed up a mouthful of blood. However, Gu Li didn't hold back. Instead, he attacked her even more fiercely. Stop it right now. Yi Zichen's eyes were bloodshot. Gu Li blinked and turned around, his expression still as confused as before. Brother Yi, what is it? Is it wrong for me to teach this animal a lesson? Just now, this animal tried to take your lover away. Shouldn't you be thanking me? Bang! He kicked her again. Stop, said Yi Zichen. Gu Li tilted his head. Brother Yi, what exactly do you mean? I told you to stop. Yi Zichen, who'd been suppressing his rage, suddenly roared. Then, beams of purple light flashed behind him. Touch them one more time. Call her an animal one more time, and I'll send you back to the path of the animal for all eternity. Oh, Gu Li arched his brows. Chapter 909. Kill. Battle cries shook the heavens. Battle cries shook the heavens. The northwest of Maple City had become the main battlefield for the 3 factions. Even though the warriors of the three realms were fighting in the middle, they were gradually showing signs of weakness. They retreated again and again. Under the pincer attack of the blood zombies and demons, the three realms' territory shrank over and over again. They stepped over the corpses of their clansmen and retreated, watching helplessly as more and more of their comrades fell to the ground. They had no way of collecting their corpses. It seems they can't hold on any longer. Hamba sneered. The other zombie progenitors hadn't even taken action yet. There was no need for them to turn the tide of the battle. They had the absolute advantage. They enjoyed watching the slaughter, especially when the zombies died with their eyes wide open or when they fell to the ground in despair. The other zombie progenitors nodded. The three realms' forces were truly at the end of their rope. What they had to do now was keep pushing forward and nibble away at their territory. In the end, the three realms' only fate would be death. As she fought the blood zombies, Li Jiai, the chief disciple of the 100 Flowers Gate, had already begun to blunt her flexible sword. She didn't even have a chance to catch her breath. Just as she killed the blood zombies around her, countless blood zombies rushed towards her. It was as if no matter how much she killed, there was no end to the blood zombies. Seeing a group of blood zombies rushing towards her, she subconsciously wanted to use a spiritual technique to deal with them. However, she realized that there was no more spiritual energy left in her body for her to use a spiritual technique to kill the blood zombies. Am I really going to die here? A hint of despair flashed across Li Jiai's delicate face. She stood there in a daze, the scenes from the modern realm flashing through her mind. In the end, her memories stopped at the sweet memories she'd had with Yi Zichen. Of course, there were sweet memories in her eyes. Her lips curved into a smile. For a moment, she was somewhat dazed. Senior apprentice sister, be careful. Just as she was lost in thought, a shout jolted her back to her senses. She looked around and saw that the blood zombies had already reached her, but in front of her. Junior apprentice sister. Her junior apprentice sister had been devoured by the blood zombies, just like that. She'd stood right behind her and witnessed it all. Senior sister, be careful. With a weak whisper, her junior sister was completely devoured by the blood zombies. I'll kill you. Li Jiai had always been a quiet girl. Even after she came to the immortal region and entered the 100 Flowers Gate, she still wasn't easy to kill. Perhaps in her subconscious mind, killing was not a good thing. For such a person to actually shout such words in such a situation, one could see just how angry she was in her heart. Die, die, die. The flexible sword in her hand continuously chopped off the heads of the blood zombies, causing blood to spurt out from their necks and drip on her face and chest. She was like a bloody person, blood dripping from her body. Die, all of you! With a swing of the flexible sword in his hand, a row of blood zombie heads flew high into the sky. Soon after, she ran in front of that junior sister, only to find that she had lost all signs of life. Pure white bones were exposed, and the bones were mixed with bright red flesh. Junior sister. She hugged her junior sister's corpse and wept bitterly, but in just a few breaths of time, the blood zombies swarmed back. Before long, Li Jiai was completely surrounded. She picked up her flexible sword from the ground, ready to fight to the death. Wither. An indifferent voice echoed through the sky. Then countless flower petals fell from the sky, landing on the blood zombies. As the petals fell, the blood zombies' flesh instantly corroded. They screamed and screamed. Soon, the 100 Flowers Gate's sect master appeared before Li Jiai. Let's go. Li Jiai landed in a relatively safe position. She stared blankly ahead, her nose sniffling incessantly. To tell the truth, she really couldn't take it anymore. She was just an ordinary girl from the modern realm. In order to avoid the calamity of her appearance, she wore an ugly skin at all times to protect herself. She was a cowardly person. That was just how her personality was. Ever since she'd arrived in the immortal region, everything here had given her an enormous shock. However, she didn't like to trouble others, so she could only bury it all in her heart. Besides, Yi Zichen had told her that they'd return. But could she really go back? This was a sea of blood and mountains of corpses, an endless horde of blood zombies, and the demons eyeing them like tigers watching their prey. Return? It seemed this was her final resting place. She'd die here, just like her junior apprentice sister. She let the blood zombies devour her flesh and blood. You're trembling. At that moment, a pair of warm hands grabbed her palms. Li Jia looked up and saw her master smiling warmly at her as he wiped the blood from her face. You're scared, aren't you? Your personality isn't suited to killing. It's really been hard on you. Master. His gentle tone instantly shattered all of Li Jia's defenses. She threw herself into the 100 Flowers Gate master's arms and sobbed uncontrollably. Xiao's dead. She died right in front of me. Those blood zombies ate her alive. Your master knows. He smiled benevolently and wiped the blood from Li Jia's face, then gently patted her shoulder to calm her down. Zombies are bloodthirsty, and blood zombies eat humans. There's nothing strange about that. Master, are we really going to die here? After a long silence, Li Jia suddenly blurted out such words. We can't kill the blood zombies, and the demons are eyeing us like tigers watching their prey. We're constantly losing ground. Are we really going to die here? We won't. The 100 Flowers Gate master was still smiling warmly. We still have reinforcements. As long as we hold on until they arrive, we'll all survive. Will there be? Li Jia's mood was very pessimistic and hopeless. She sat on the ground dejectedly with a bitter smile. We haven't seen any reinforcements for so long. Will they really come? They will. They definitely will. It's just that they're a little late. We still need to buy time for them. How? Li Jia smiled dejectedly. You and your sisters are still young. You still have a future. The 100 Flowers Gate master smiled and ruffled Li Jia's hair. You and your sisters are still young. You still have a future. Your master has nothing to give you. I can only give you a short 6 hours. I'm not sure if the reinforcements will arrive after 6 hours, but at least you still have a chance. I've never told you before. You really are like my sister when I was young. With that, the 100 Flowers Gate master's expression turned resolute. Then, he floated into the sky. Snap! He snapped his fingers. 100,000 feet tall black rose suddenly appeared in the blood-stained void. The rose was in bud and was about to bloom. Sect leader Hua spoke coldly at that moment. Chapter 9:10. The sorcerer in an ordinary village. A handsome young man squatted in the corner of a dilapidated straw hut, covering his head with his hands. This sorcerer still dares to come out. Beat him up. Several boys and girls stood on a rock a few meters away from him, picking up stones from the ground and throwing them at him. But the young man squatting in the corner didn't resist at all. He just let them hit him. Beat him to death, beat him to death. The group of children hit him even harder. Just then, an honest-looking middle-aged man appeared in front of the young man. Whose kids are you? I'll tell your parents later. Run, one of the children shouted. The children who were still throwing stones at the young man all scattered in all directions. Little Hai, are you hurt? After scaring away the group of children, the honest-looking middle-aged man squatted on the ground, trying to help the young man up. Get lost. Unexpectedly, the young man didn't appreciate it at all. He pushed the middle-aged man in front of him away and even pushed him to the ground. But what was even more surprising was that the young man's voice was that of a girl's. After pushing the middle-aged man to the ground, the young man's face revealed an apologetic expression. But in the blink of an eye, he coldly glanced at the middle-aged man, then indifferently left the straw hut. Night had fallen. The smoke in the village had also dissipated. Every family blew out their lamps and prepared to rest. In a wing outside the village, a handsome young man sat by a pond. His eyes shone with a depth that shouldn't have appeared for someone his age. He looked at the bright moon reflected in the center of the pond. He enjoyed this kind of peace. Here, perhaps only night was considered his time. There were still some bruises on his face, and there were bits of grass mixed in with the top of his head. These were all caused by the beating he received. He didn't want to care, because even if he cleaned himself up, it wouldn't take long for him to return to this state. In the eyes of others, he was a sorcerer, an existence that everyone in the village couldn't wait to avoid. Who is it? The young man sitting by the pond suddenly spoke. Having been beaten up all the time, he had developed a vigilance that ordinary people couldn't match. He was like a startled deer at the slightest sign of trouble. But under this handsome face, there was always that strange young girl's voice. "It's me." A middle-aged man walked out from the bushes outside the pond. This man was the one who had helped him chase the group of children away. At this time, he was still holding a lunchbox in his hand. It seemed like he was delivering dinner to the young man. Seeing that it was him, a trace of resentment flashed across the handsome youth's eyes. He turned his head away and continued to look at the bright moon in the pond. "Little Hai, you must be hungry after not eating for a day. Come, eat it while it's hot. This is your favorite drumstick." The young man's indifference caused the middle-aged man to feel a bit lonely, but he still smiled as he walked over to the young man and opened the lunchbox. The food in the lunchbox was still steaming hot. It was a very simple meal, a bowl of white rice and a chicken leg. However, this simple meal was a delicacy that was hard to come by. "I don't want to eat," the young man answered without even turning his head. "You're still growing. How can you not eat?" The middle-aged man was still smiling. He handed the lunchbox to the young man and said, "Eat it while it's hot. Look at this drumstick. I asked old Jung to pick a big one for you. I said I don't want to eat." The young man flipped the lunchbox over. The white rice and the drumstick all fell into the pond. The middle-aged man's hand trembled, but the young man didn't seem to care at all. He snorted. "I said I don't want to eat. You can't blame me." He got up to leave, but before he could take more than a few steps, the middle-aged man behind him spoke in a deep voice. "Stop." The young man's footsteps paused for a moment, but he continued walking forward. "I told you to stop." The honest middle-aged man lost his temper. "TCH." The young man sneered, then kicked at the rocks and continued walking forward. "Well, hi, I told you to stop. Do you still have any respect for your father?" The middle-aged man's brows furrowed, and his entire body trembled with anger. This time, the young man stopped. The middle-aged man panted as he hurried over. "You." Just as he was about to point at the young man, he saw the tears welling up in the young man's eyes. Under the moonlight, they sparkled. The middle-aged man's anger subsided. His lips quivered as he reached out to smack the young man's head, but the young man stubbornly dodged. "Hate your father, right?" After a long moment, the middle-aged man let out a long sigh. The young man said nothing. The middle-aged man looked at the stubbornness on the young man's face and the tears in his eyes. He sighed deeply. "Yes, you should hate me, but I'm doing this for your sister." "Sister." At that moment, the young man, who'd been silent all this time, finally spoke. His eyes brimmed with tears as he looked at the middle-aged man in front of him. He looked at his father. "For the sake of my sister, you're willing to turn me into this, neither human nor ghost? I can't blame the villagers for cursing me. Sometimes, even I wonder if I'm a man or a woman." "Of course you're a boy. Then why do I sound like my sister?" "That's—" After a long moment of hesitation, the middle-aged man swallowed his words. The young man looked at him for a while, then suddenly laughed. "I know even if you don't tell me. Actually, my body has always been nourishing my sister's soul, right? It's just that I've been nourishing it for too long, and my sister's soul has overlapped with mine, right? You? How did you know?" The middle-aged man's face was filled with shock. He immediately realized that he shouldn't have said that, so he explained, "No, no." The young man's lips curled into a smile. "You don't have to hide it. Not only do I know this, I also know that you're not a blacksmith. You're actually the immortal that everyone in the village yearns for. You're the one who forced my sister's soul in my body, aren't you? You think I don't know anything? I know very well in my heart, but I just don't want to say it." The young man's face was filled with a sad smile. "I'm just a cauldron for my sister to nourish her soul, right? It's okay, I don't care. It's not what you think. There's no need to explain." The young man stubbornly refused to let the tears fall from his eyes. He sneered. "You really do have a bad sense of humor. You're a good immortal, but you don't want to be a blacksmith. Do you think the countryside life is wonderful? But I don't think so. These past few years, I've been rather miserable. Now that we've announced our surrender, shouldn't you give me some compensation?" "What compensation do you want?" Chapter 9:11. The black rose blossoms again night, light shone on the ground, covering the simple village in a silvery white veil. The frogs by the pond croaked. A thick cloud passed in front of the moon, causing the bright night to darken in the blink of an eye. Beside the pond, the middle-aged man and the youth stood facing each other. The middle-aged man frowned at the youth in front of him. He saw the tears in his eyes and the maniacal smile on his face. "What's wrong? Can't you do it?" After not getting a reply from the middle-aged man for a long time, the youth sneered and walked away. "Is this what you really think?" The silent middle-aged man said as the young man brushed past him. "Of course." The youth purposely put on an indifferent expression, but his disguise was so obvious in front of the middle-aged man. His eyes shone with excitement, anticipation for the unknown. "Fine, since you want to walk this path, I'll let you," the middle-aged man said after a brief silence. "Come back with me." Inside the dilapidated brick house. The dirty house wasn't very big. More than half of the room was filled with metal refining tools, as well as many hoes and sickles used for farm work. There were also a few blades mixed in. The youth hated this place. In the past, he would only stand outside the door and never set foot inside. But this time he came. The reason was simple. He was about to become an immortal. Although he was a loner, he had secretly heard the stories of immortals from the villagers. There was nothing he couldn't do. When the adults told stories about immortals, the children who always bullied him would be filled with curiosity and yearning for immortals. If he learned immortal spells, perhaps those children could become friends with him. Yes, he wanted to become friends. The youth wasn't a bad person. Even if the children always bullied him, he still wanted to use spells to exchange for companions, not to use spells to bully them back. "Find a place to sit." The middle-aged man entered the room and gestured for the youth to find a place to sit. He didn't immediately teach him immortal cultivation. Instead, he packed up the hoes that were to be handed over to the villagers tomorrow. The youth sat obediently to the side. At this moment, he didn't look the same as before. This was the nature of children, and it had been like this since ancient times. After a long time, the middle-aged man tidied up the hoe in the room and walked to the young man. The young man who had been waiting eagerly saw him and hurriedly said, "Shall we start now?" "Before we start, I need to remind you." The middle-aged man's eyes were filled with seriousness. "If you choose to cultivate, then it means that you will have to leave the mortal world in the future. Your future experience will not be as smooth as it is now. You will be walking on the edge of a knife, and the slightest mistake could put your life in danger. Even so, do you still want to take this path?" And then, the young man nodded his head like a chick pecking at grains. Something about leaving the world of mortals and wandering on the tip of a knife. He didn't listen to them at all. Right now, he just wanted to quickly learn magic so that he could show off his skills in front of those guys. The middle-aged man was not surprised by the youth's behavior. Wasn't he the same back then? In order for his son to live a peaceful life, he deliberately lived in seclusion in the mountains and became a farmer in this village. However, he still could not stop his son from stepping on the same path as him. His heart sank. The middle-aged man couldn't help but ask again, "Have you really decided?" "Of course." The young man nodded with certainty. "Good. Since you are still so certain, then I won't try to persuade you anymore." With that, the middle-aged man took out a secret manual and threw it to the young man. The young man carefully caught the book. He didn't ask the middle-aged man what it was. According to the adults in the village, this should be the legendary secret manual. His eyes were filled with excitement and curiosity. He opened the book and saw the lowest level of drawing energy into the body. Even so, it was a whole new world for him. In an instant, he was completely immersed in it. His little hands kept flipping through the pages, Black Rose. "Hey, Dad, are we using Black Rose?" "Yes." The middle-aged man nodded. "That's great." The young man excitedly clenched his fists. If he displayed the moves of Black Rose in front of those kids, they would definitely be dumbfounded. A few hours passed. "Dad," the young man who was flipping through the book suddenly spoke. The middle-aged man, sitting by the smelting furnace, glanced at him. "What is it? Why is it recorded?" The young man frowned, as if organizing his words. Wither, why are they all like this?" Before he finished speaking, the young man flipped to the end of the book. "Hey, I got it. Bloom. Dad, this move must be really cool. Those wither and wither sound a little uncomfortable. I want to learn this move. Dad, teach me this move. Let's bloom." The young man excitedly pointed to the end of the book. However, the middle-aged man glanced at him. I can teach you everything but this move. I hope you won't use this move for the rest of your life." "Why?" The young man frowned. "Why can't you teach me this move?" Right now, he could only understand the spiritual techniques in the book literally. Wither didn't look like good spiritual techniques. If he showed these spiritual techniques to those kids, they might not bully him, but they might stay away out of fear. He wanted to cultivate to make friends. He didn't want to learn this move. "Because if you use this move, you'll die." The young man acted as if he didn't hear clearly. "Dad, what did you just say?" "I'll die. Yes, I'll die." The middle-aged man didn't waste any more words. The young man was good at reading people. Looking at the middle-aged man's expression, he more or less guessed that he was telling the truth. "I'll actually die." Death was too far away for a child his age. However, he didn't want to learn a move that would kill him if he used it. Then why write it in here? Since you'll die if you use it, who would use it? The young man angrily threw the book to the side and pouted. He did want to become an immortal. He wanted to use immortal techniques to win friends, but he didn't want to die after using it. Someone will use it. "Only an idiot would use it," the young man snorted. At that moment, the middle-aged man picked up the book and gently patted the young man's head. Chapter 9:12. A reason to blossom secluded cultivation. When a young man came out of seclusion, he finally understood what the middle-aged man had told him back then. He'd stepped onto the path of immortality. As long as he chose the path of cultivation, he'd walked far away from the world of mortals. At the time, he naively wanted to use immortal spells to win the acceptance of the village children. Only when he emerged did he realize how laughable it had been. Immortals lived long lives. To him, seclusion had been like the snap of a finger, but to mortals, it was a lifetime. He looked at the children in the village, who'd gone from youth to old age. After a moment's hesitation, he turned around and walked away with the village on his back. He knew that he no longer belonged here. The youth really was made for immortal cultivation. In just 100 years, he'd reached the sky immortal level. Fully fledged, he founded the 100 Flowers Gate and stationed himself in the immortal region's 100 Flower City. His father disappeared after his seclusion, never to be seen again. 1,000 years passed. In the blink of an eye, 1,000 years had passed. The youth was now the master of a gate. Outside the immortal region, or even in the entire 3 realms, he was a powerhouse. His hands and eyes were everywhere, and he could decide the fate of 10,000 people with a smile. But his heart was still lonely. The 100 Flowers battle technique. He could skillfully use all the techniques, and he'd even modified them. But he'd never released the final bloom of the secret manual. He'd gotten used to the withering of flowers. In truth, he was curious as to what a black rose would look like after it bloomed. But he had no reason to bloom, and he couldn't find any reason to do so. He'd once thought that the middle-aged man's reason was that he might release it when he died. But after all this time, he realized that the middle-aged man hadn't meant that. Die for someone else? He snorted disdainfully. The path of immortality was a path that defied the heavens. Only selfishness would allow one to live longer and walk further. Die for someone else? He wasn't that stupid, and he didn't believe anyone would be that stupid. Until, Wahai, sect leader Hua. Amidst the swirling clouds, Huahai stared at the old man in blood-red robes. His left arm was twisted irregularly, and his body was riddled with bone-deep wounds. Someone plotted against me. Huahai couldn't help but grit his teeth. Due to his childhood memories, his thoughts were a little extreme. He had tried countless times to find the middle-aged man and ask him about the true meaning behind his actions. However, even with his current strength, he still could not find any information about the middle-aged man. It was as if he had evaporated into thin air while he was in seclusion, evaporation. However, just as he was about to give up on the search, he received a message. Without any hesitation, he bent down and walked forward, but he did not expect that this was a trap left by his enemy. 1,000 years old, in this immortal region that had an ancient history, could only be considered a youth. His 100 Flowers Gate's bold and decisive expansion naturally encroached on the interests of certain people. However, he didn't care at all. In his eyes, those guys were just losers. He didn't care about them at all. He had no respect for others and did as he pleased, but he didn't expect to suffer a setback here. Our insufferably arrogant sect leader Hua, aren't you rather arrogant? Now, it seems that you're only SOSO? Beside the old man in the blood-red robe stood a few middle-aged men who looked like merchants. Needless to say, these guys were definitely the ones whose interests were harmed. A bunch of scoundrels, snorted Hua Hai disdainfully. In his eyes, these merchants were nothing more than ants. If they hadn't found Elder Shui. Elder Shui was an old senior of the Immortal Region, the sect master of the Blood Temple sect. Even the major powers of the Immortal Region's sacred lands had to give him some face, much less those outside the Immortal Region. Although the Hundred Flowers Gate had plenty of momentum, it paled in comparison to the Blood Temple sect. In terms of strength, the difference between him and Elder Shui was like the difference between heaven and earth. There was an absolute gap between their strengths, and his arm had been severed. I can only use that move. Just as he was about to grit his teeth and make his decision, a man in a woven rush raincoat appeared in front of him. When he saw the familiar figure, Hua Hai's heart trembled inexplicably. It's you. Not bad. The man in the woven rush raincoat turned around. It was none other than Hua Hai's father. He smiled and nodded, but Hua Hai could tell that the middle-aged man's "not bad" referred to his current strength. Early Sky Immortal, Hua Hai, who'd already reached the mid-stage Sky Immortal stage, could tell his father's strength with a single glance. He furrowed his brows and roared, "What are you doing here?" "To save you." "You can't beat him," rebuked Hua Hai. "Hurry up and leave. You don't need to worry about my business. Have you forgotten about that forbidden technique?" The middle-aged man in the woven rush raincoat smiled. Hua Hai's knitted brows instantly froze. His lips quivered. "Do you remember what I told you before I found out? My reason is right now." Bloom. Amidst the murderous atmosphere, the snap of his fingers was ear-piercing. Hua Hai smiled calmly as he stood in the sky, his fingers still in the same position. A black rose, tens of thousands of meters long, suddenly appeared in the sky. It was a bud, ready to bloom. Beside it, countless tiny roses appeared, either at the bottom of the sea of flowers or on top of its head. 5 roses. Including the one in the center, there were 5 in total. "Look!" The moment Rose appeared, almost everyone turned to look at her. "That's a blossoming rose." The city lords of the Beast region and the Immortal region couldn't help but arch their brows. The 100 Flowers battle technique was one of the more famous battle techniques of the Immortal region. Hua Hai, the head of the 100 Flowers Gate, had given even more people a better understanding of it. They all knew that this technique was called blossoming, and they also knew the price of blossoming. "Master," when Li Jiai saw this, she couldn't help but tear up. Buy time. Was this why her master was so certain that he'd be the one to buy time? A blossoming black rose. Hitorigami, the zombie progenitor who had remained in the distance, couldn't help but snort and laugh. Using your life in exchange for a fleeting bloom? It's quite sad to think about it. It's just a bud waiting to bloom. Once it's all in full bloom, it'll probably be quite magnificent. Huh, tragic, is it? Hua Hai smiled calmly. Once upon a time, he thought the same thing, but now. He stared intently at the zombie progenitors blocking their path. Then, his gaze landed on Li Jiai and the senior and junior sisters behind her. After that, the words that he would never be able to forget suddenly appeared in his mind. Chapter 9:13. The Black Rose blooms. "Master, this girl has been pacing back and forth outside her sect. It seems like she hasn't eaten in a long time, so I gave her some food. However, I discovered that this girl is extremely talented, so I brought her back to the sect. What do you think?" In the main hall of the sect, Hua Hai sat in a chair, looking down at the 2 women in the front hall. One wore a white robe with a black rose embroidered on her chest. Beside her stood a dark-faced girl, whose eyes shone with fear of the unknown. "Raise your head and let me see," said Hua Hai coolly. The white-robed woman turned to the woman beside her and whispered, "Let's go," Hua Hai said coolly from his seat at the head of the table. The girl bit her lips and raised her head. When she saw the sea of flowers on the chair, she revealed an astonished expression. Hua Hai frowned, and the girl hurriedly lowered her head. The white-robed woman by her side cursed inwardly. She knew that her master hated the way others looked at him the most. Master, Enough. You may leave. Huahai waved his hand at the woman, who didn't dare to hesitate. She left the hall. At the same time, Huahai walked down from his chair. He approached the girl, who retreated step by step. You're very afraid of me, said Huahai, stopping. The girl bit her lip and said nothing. Huahai glanced at her, then asked in a flat tone, Do you think I'm a sorcerer? I'm clearly a man, but I speak with a woman's voice? The girl Huahai had forced into the corner shook her head. When he saw her shake her head, Huahai couldn't help but arch his brows. You're not afraid of me, a sorcerer? The girl shook her head again. Did Rose tell you all about my taboos before coming here? Is that why you're acting like this? That's fine. I won't blame you, but I don't like it when people lie to me. No. The girl, who'd been silent all this time, shook her head nervously. Big Sister Rose didn't tell me anything. Then how could you not be afraid? I've seen many people like you. The way I see it, everyone is equal. You shouldn't look at anyone differently. The girl's voice was still timid, but there was a hint of determination in her voice. Then she put on a timid expression. Besides, you don't seem like a bad person. You've seen many. Huahai arched an eyebrow, but didn't pursue the matter. I like what you just said about everyone being equal. Come, tell me a name. Li Jiai. Li Jiai, he repeated. Why are you pacing back and forth in front of my mountain? Li Jiai, he repeated. I don't know, but I don't know why I'm here. I've been there for long, but I dawn, he said. I'm a little scared. I see that there are many girls here, so I want to stay here for a while. Despite his vast experience, he'd never heard of Bingsheng, but he wasn't the type to get to the bottom of things. I don't know much about this Bingsheng you speak of, but since you've appeared in the 100 Flowers Gate, it means we're fated to meet. How about this? I'll accept you as an inner disciple. What do you say? Li Jai licked her lips, a little hesitant. All right, it's settled, he said, then called out to her, Chong Wei, Master. Before long, the white-robed woman from before appeared in the main hall. Take Li Jai away. From now on, she's my chief inner disciple and the head disciple of the sect. Anyone who dares bully her will be expelled from the 100 Flowers Gate. When she heard this, the white-robed woman froze. Chief inner disciple. She'd been by her master's side since the founding of the 100 Flowers Gate, but even now, she wasn't an inner disciple. This girl had won her master's favor as soon as she arrived, and had even become chief. She was a little confused, but didn't dare voice her doubts. Your disciple understands. You may leave. With a wave of his book, Huahai returned to his seat at the head of the hall. For a long time, he thought back to Li Jiai's words. Everyone is equal. Everyone is equal. As he hovered in the air, Huahai couldn't help but think back to when he'd first met Li Jiai. It was her words that had made her his inner disciple, the chief disciple of the 100 Flowers Gate. It was her words that had redeemed him. Disciples of the 100 Flowers Gate, heed my command. At that moment, Huahai's voice rang out in the minds of all the disciples and elders of the 100 Flowers Gate. From now on, Chief Disciple Li Jiai will be the sect master of the 100 Flowers Gate. All elders must assist her with all their might. This sudden transmission stunned everyone. Li Jiai stared at the proud figure in the sky, her pearly white teeth biting down hard on her lips. Master! Huahai looked at Li Jiai, who was biting her lip, and sent her a soft, gentle look. Jiai, the future of the 100 Flowers Gate is in your hands. Mas, your disciple understands. Li Jiai, who was in the middle of complaining, forcibly swallowed her tears and immediately nodded with a resolute gaze. She knew that anything she said now would be useless. All she could do was ensure that the 100 Flowers Gate's legacy would last forever. I think highly of you. Huahai chuckled, then retracted his gaze and looked at the zombie progenitors. These roadblocks wouldn't be easy to deal with. Let me go test him out. Hamba smiled calmly and took a few steps forward, but Jiang Chun stopped her. Let me go. None of you can fly, so you'll be at a disadvantage fighting him. It just so happens that I'd like to test out the strength of these blooming roses. You guys stay here and stand guard. Don't let the people of the 3 realms escape. Understood. The other zombie progenitors nodded. Jiang Chun flapped his wings and took to the skies. You're the one who's coming, said Hua Hai coldly. Jiang Chun nodded calmly, then looked up at the 5 black roses in the sky. Of the 5 roses, the one he cared about the most was the 10,000-meter tall one. The others were all 100 meters tall. At a glance, he could tell that the 10,000-meter tall rose was the most dangerous. None of them can fly, said Jiang Chun. Even if they come, it'll be useless. A black rose that was about to bloom. Was this the sign of the 100 flowers battle skills, forbidden skill blooming? But the way I see it, it's nothing special. It's a short-lived bloom, and in the end, it'll wither. You're right, but there are some things I can't agree with. Hua Hai looked coldly at Jiang Chun, who was flapping his wings. A short-lived bloom means that something beautiful only appears for a short time. But even if it's only for a short time, it's still beautiful. Even if my bloom is short-lived, I want it to be incomparably dazzling. So dazzling that you'll remember it, even if you go to hell. With that, Hua Hai glared at Jiang Chun and roared. Chapter 9:14. The price of blossoming as the main battlefield. The battle raged like wildfire in Maple City. However, thousands of miles away in the Beast region, the clansmen continued on with their normal lives. Of course, they could sense something was amiss from the movements of their clansmen, but it wasn't enough to affect them. Within the Dragon Clan, Xia Kiki stood in front of the clan head, her hands behind her back as she listened to his nagging. I've heard so many of your heroic stories that my ears are about to grow calluses. The familiar opening made Xia Kiki collapse. In the years she'd been with the Dragon Clan, she'd had to listen to the old man's nagging every few days. She pouted impatiently, then looked up at the sky. Xia Kiki suddenly exclaimed in astonishment. She blinked and looked carefully for a while, then pointed at the sky and said to the old man, "It's not like that. Look, Grandpa, there's so many roses in the sky. They're so beautiful." The old man was still nagging at Xia Kiki for complaining about his nagging. When he heard her words, he glanced up at the sky. Just as he was about to continue nagging, he couldn't avert his gaze. Black roses. The old man's eyes flashed with solemnity as he stared fixedly at the distant roses. "Grandpa, these roses are much more beautiful than your stories," Xia Kiki giggled, only to discover that the old man wasn't cursing her like before. "Grandpa, I'm talking to you." She glanced at Grandpa Sheng and saw his solemn expression. "Grandpa, what's so special about those roses?" "All right, go back to your room and wait." To her surprise, the old man, who usually liked having Xia Kiki stay at his place, took the initiative to ask her to leave. In the past, Xia Kiki had to sneak away when the old man wasn't paying attention. This unusual development caused a trace of curiosity to appear in Xia Kiki's eyes. "Grandpa, go back." The old man's eyes flashed with a trace of dignity. Seeing that the old man was getting angry, Xia Kiki stuck out her tongue and left. Before she could take more than a few steps, she heard the old man speak again. "Tell your second uncle to come see me." With that, the old man's gaze fell on the roses in the sky. "Bloom, Hua Hai actually used this move. The situation isn't looking good." Hua Hai actually used that move. The people of the Beast region and the Immortal region couldn't help but arch their brows, especially Lin Shihe. When she saw the roses in the sky, her face filled with astonishment. Bloom. This was the final forbidden skill of 100 Flowers battle technique. It required the 5 internal organs of the human body as the price of blooming. When 5 roses bloomed, the spellcaster would die without a doubt. However, the spellcaster would also be able to obtain an increase in strength that was dozens of times greater than the spellcaster's current strength for a short period of time. Given Hua Hai's current strength as a half-step immortal king, his blossoming, they would obtain strength close to that of a heavenly supreme. Sect leader Hua. Lin Shihe could not help but look at Li Jiai. As the city lord of 100 Flowers City, her relationship with the 100 Flowers Gate was naturally the closest. She knew that Hua Hai treated Li Jiai like his own child. He had even taught her the 100 Flowers battle technique, which he had never taught to anyone else. "Jiai, my condolences." "City Lord Lin, why do you say that?" Li Jiai simply stared at the sea of flowers floating in the sky. "I'm not sad at all. Once Master has made his decision, no amount of sadness can change anything. The only thing I can do is make the 100 Flowers Gate even stronger in the future master created for me. When the others heard this, they couldn't help but be moved. They could sense Li Jiayi's determination from her tone. They nodded inwardly. Then one of the city lords and generals asked, "What should we do now? What should we do? What should we do?" Luo Wei glanced coolly at the speaker, then snorted. "Do what we have to do." As soon as he finished speaking, he took the lead and charged toward the blood zombies blocking their way. However, as he charged forward, he glanced briefly at the sea of flowers floating in the sky. "Sect Leader Hua, your determination. We received it. I'll remember it even in the infernal realm." As he flapped his wings, Jiangchun couldn't help but sneer. He smiled playfully, then shrugged. "Then I'd like to see just how dazzling your short-lived brilliance can be." With that, Jiangchun put away his playful expression and tensed up. Before the battle began, he could sneer at his opponent to sway his emotions, but in a real fight, he couldn't afford to be careless. He'd heard of the 100 Flowers battle technique. Moreover, the few roses in the void gave him quite a bit of pressure. "To what extent? I'll stare at you, and you'll remember it." Hua Hai grinned viciously at Jiangchun. He no longer needed to worry about his demeanor. The moment he decided to take this step, he'd already made up his mind. It was time to truly go crazy. Whoosh! One of the 5 roses in the void slowly bloomed its flower bud. The black rose, which was as black as ink, completely opened its petals. The instant the rose appeared, Jiangchun sensed that Hua Hai's strength had suddenly risen by a full level. Nymph. However, as his strength increased, Hua Hai couldn't help but snort coldly. He furrowed his brows, and a barely noticeable trickle of sweat trickled down his face. His spleen. This rose corresponded to one of the 5 organs, the spleen. The price of its release was the destruction of his spleen. "It hurts that much," Hua Hai muttered to himself. Hua Hai couldn't help but mutter to himself. "This is the first time I've felt my spleen shatter so clearly. But I'm used to it now. Besides, this level of improvement is no match for the Zombie King." As he muttered to himself, a second rose bloomed. A third rose. A fourth rose. At the same time the rose bloomed, he also gained the strength to challenge the zombie progenitor before him. Jiangchun watched as Hua Hai's strength steadily increased. In the blink of an eye, Hua Hai had transformed from an ant to an opponent even he had to take seriously. He couldn't help but sigh in admiration at the talent of the creator of this spiritual technique. Not bad. This was Jiangchun's affirmation of Hua Hai's strength, but it wasn't enough to intimidate him. The way he saw it, it wasn't enough. The sea of flowers, however, stopped in its tracks. It did not bloom the final rose. "You stopped?" Jiangchun couldn't help but arch his brows. "If you think you can defeat me with this level of strength, I'll have to disappoint you. The current you isn't as dazzling as you once were." Chapter 9:15. A final dazzle before he'd even finished speaking. Hua Hai stomped down hard into the air. The space beneath his feet instantly collapsed, and his body shot forward. Jiangchun stood off in the distance, his expression solemn. He crossed his arms in front of his chest. Boom! He retreated explosively. Jiangchun slid several hundred meters through the air before he managed to stop himself from retreating. His expression was solemn. Just now, he could have dodged, but he was curious as to just how much the rose had increased Hua Hai's strength. That was why he'd chosen to take the blow head-on. It had actually forced him back 100 meters. He was somewhat surprised. Judging from the fluctuations of energy within Hua Hai's body, he was probably only as strong as a peak immortal king. However, his physical strength was far greater than that of an ordinary immortal king. Interesting. He couldn't help but chuckle to himself, even though this attack had caught him by surprise. But now he had a rough idea. That's all you've got. Jiangchun shook his somewhat numb arms, then flapped his wings and flew back to Hua Hai. Hua Hai stood in the air, a faint smile tugging at the corners of his lips. Is that so? He attacked brazenly. Hua didn't waste any more words with Jiangchun. He knew full well that his time was limited. However, this time, Jiangchun didn't use his arms to defend. Instead, he met the attack head-on. Boom! Boom! Endless booms filled the air. Bang! As they fought, Huahai's internal organs shattered, one after the other. The rose's blossoming was magnificent, but beneath its appearance, Huahai's internal organs were withering away. His kidneys, his liver, his organs shattered, but the pain he felt stimulated Huahai's fiery desire to fight. TCH, to think he could fight Jiangchun so fiercely. This demon is quite something. Off in the distance, Yi Zichen and Gu Li were already at daggers drawn. But as soon as Huahai's rose blossomed, Gu Li deliberately changed the subject. Just as they were about to attack, they ceased their attacks. It's nothing. Black Dragon couldn't help but snort. At their level, there was no way they couldn't see the price Huahai had paid for his sudden increase in strength. In the end, a short-lived flower is only a short-lived flower. Right now, he's only radiating his last remnants. When the heat dissipated, all that was left was a skeleton. In comparison, the zombie progenitors under your command are quite strong. They're not at a disadvantage even against peak immortal kings. Gu Li, well played. Gu Li naturally understood the deeper meaning behind Black Dragon's words. You flatter me. Gu Li cupped his hands respectfully at Black Dragon, then his gaze landed on Yi Zichen. Emperor Yi, you're definitely heading over to help, right? Unfortunately, Black Dragon and I definitely won't let you leave. Actually, it's not bad to stay here for a while. Isn't it boring to fight and kill? He ignored her. Little did they know, after calming down, Yi Zichen really didn't dare go back. He knew full well that Gu Li and Black Dragon wouldn't let him leave. Even if he went to help, the two of them would definitely make a move. In comparison, it wasn't a loss for him to stay here and stop the two of them. What he needed to do now was gather enough spiritual power to heal his arm, so long as Gu Li and Black Dragon gave him the slightest chance. Give him a fatal blow. Gu Li knew he'd made a fool of himself. He shrugged, then turned his gaze back to Huahai and Jiangchun. He was quite interested in the fight between the two of them, especially against the still-blooming, towering black rose. Boom! After an intense collision, Jiangchun and Huahai separated. What's wrong? Didn't you say you wanted me to use my body to remember your brilliance? I'm really sorry, but forgive me for saying this. I really can't remember such a method. Jiangchun smiled casually. In truth, his situation wasn't as relaxed as he seemed. However, he knew that his opponent was in even worse shape than he was. Huahai's body was drenched in sweat. The moment his lungs had shattered, he'd lost the ability to breathe. It was unbearable. He wanted to stretch his neck to feel the air, but it was impossible. Sensing Jiangchun's sneer, he reached out and wiped the sweat from his face. No wonder the zombie progenitors were so powerful that even the beast region's great sages couldn't defeat them. They were already at the peak of the immortal king level, yet Jiangchun wasn't at a disadvantage in the slightest. Moreover, with the backlash from his shattered internal organs, there was a faint sense of oppression. Looks like I'll have to take that step after all. Huahai raised his head. His bloodshot eyes stared at the black rose that was tens of thousands of feet tall. Then he reached out and placed his hand on his chest, feeling the powerful beating of his heart. Bloom! For some reason, Huahai couldn't bring himself to say it. Although this was his first time using this forbidden technique, Huahai knew full well that the previous blooms were just an appetizer. Even if the first 4 bloomed, he'd still have a way out. But if the 5th rose bloomed, he'd have no way out. He hesitated. Anyone would feel fear in the face of death, even those on the brink of despair, especially when facing death. He knew he'd die, yet he'd still do it. That was even more terrifying. For a long while, he couldn't bring himself to say the final bloom. Slap! Up in the sky, Huahai inexplicably slapped himself in the face. What the hell are you doing? Roared Huahai inwardly. Didn't you prepare beforehand? Why are you retreating now? What the hell are you doing? He clenched his fists, angrily berating the weakness in his heart. Beneath his feet, the trapped cultivators were still fighting fiercely, bathed in blood. Then he saw Li Jiai and the disciples of the 100 Flowers Gate. Even if their swords and blades were blunt, even if their spiritual power was exhausted, even if they knew they were about to die, still, They fought without a care for their own safety. Hua Hai. Oh, Hua Hai, are you no match for the disciples of your sect? Hua Hai roared inwardly. Suddenly, he heard Jiangchen's mocking laugh. What scared? It was just a simple sneer, but it fiercely hit his heart. Creak. He gritted his teeth, then looked up at the towering rose in the sky. Determination flashed through his eyes. Since he'd chosen this path, he had to grit his teeth and continue. Retreat. He couldn't do it. It seems you made up your mind? Then let's hurry up. I also want to see the last rose and see what kind of monster it is. If you want it, I'll satisfy you. As his voice faded, Hua Hai roared at the rose. Chapter 9:16. Chapter 9:16. In the battle, quickly a middle-aged man in azure robes walked in from outside the dragon race's main hall. His eyes were bright like stars, and his face was as sharp as a blade. His entire body radiated an aura of righteousness, and his gait was vigorous and vigorous. This was Xia Kik's second uncle, the second son of the dragon race's old clan head, Xia Ingqiu. Father, Kiki said you were looking for me, and Macham. The old clan head didn't open his mouth. Instead, he calmly replied, and Macham. From his expression, Xia Ingqiu sensed that something was amiss. He furrowed his brows, then probed. Did something happen? Did the immortal region's Maple City receive any reinforcements? Asked the clan head. Not yet. Xia Ingqiu shook his head. I've been sending people to keep an eye out, but I haven't received any news that reinforcements are needed. With that, he arched his brows. Father, why are you bringing this up? Could it be that the immortal region... No reinforcements? The old patriarch's eyebrows furrowed into a frown. His face, which resembled the dried bark of an old tree, was filled with anger. Look, he pointed at the sky. Xia Ingqiu hurriedly looked over. This, no reinforcements? That's what you meant by no reinforcements. The fact that Hua Hai had chosen to use this technique meant that the situation on his side had reached an abyss of suffering. And you're still telling me that you haven't received any reinforcements? Boom. The old clan head smashed his sandalwood chair to smithereens. Flames of fury surged from within him. Don't underestimate this old man. Thousands of years ago, he was publicly acknowledged as the strongest expert in the beast region. Bang! Unable to bear the pressure, Xia Ingqiu knelt to the ground, but he didn't complain in the slightest. This was his mistake. Who knows how many of our brothers and sisters are in dire straits right now? And you're telling me that you haven't received any reinforcements? I was careless, said Xia Ingqiu through gritted teeth. I'll send reinforcements right away. By the time your reinforcements arrive, it'll be too late. The old clan head frowned. Shouldn't you be sending reinforcements now? You should be investigating the people you sent. Our dragon clan might have already infiltrated the demon clan spy. Immediately go and investigate this matter. As for the immortal region, I will... Let me go. Just when the old patriarch slammed the table and was about to get up, an ethereal voice appeared in the hall. Not long after, a white-haired old man with a youthful complexion appeared in the hall. Why are you here? Even the old patriarch didn't dare to sit on his chair and stood up to welcome the newcomer. In the current dragon clan, only the old dragon god in the dragon god ring could make the old clan leader treat him as a junior. No need to stand on ceremony. The spiritual body of the old dragon god smiled. I came here to tell you that I'll head over to the immortal region. How can I do that? All right, stop fighting. The dragon clan needs you to keep watch over the clan. It just so happens that I have some ties with Emperor Yi of the immortal region, so it's best if I go. However, Ingqiu. Here, replied Xia Ingqiu. Old Xia is right. You really should thoroughly investigate the dragon clan situation, said the old patriarch. I already have a direction for my investigation. In a moment, I'll take care of it. That would be for the best. The dragon god nodded calmly. Then let's do as I say. I'll go to the immortal region, while old Xia stays behind to keep watch. Understood, said the old patriarch and Xia Ingqiu in unison. Eternal Black Rose, unleash your final brilliance. Down below, Li Jiai and the other members of the 100 Flowers Gate fought the demons and zombies. When they heard Hua Hai's furious roar, their eyes reddened involuntarily. his final brilliance. Master! Li Jai bit down hard on her lips, so hard that it seemed she'd draw blood. The other major powers of the Beast region and the Immortal region could sense that Hua Hai was about to fight to the death, inwardly praying for him. They didn't pause for even a moment to obliterate the obstacles in front of them. Up in the sky, Hua Hai's veins bulged. His eyes were bloodshot, terrifying to behold. He threw his head back and roared. Not far away, Jiangchen smiled calmly. Then his gaze fell on the black rose he'd always feared, the one he'd always wanted to investigate. It opened. After Hua Hai's roar, the 10,000-foot-tall black rose slowly bloomed. Different from the previous roses, this rose's bloom was much more enchanting than the previous rose's bloom. In the time it took to brew a cup of tea, the 10,000-foot-tall black rose was in full bloom. Was that all? Of course not. The black rose bloomed, but at the center of the rose, there was a tiny golden person curled up inside. The moment the flower completely bloomed, the little person also crawled out from the flower bud. Whoosh! It entered Hua Hai's forehead. Thump! Thump! When the tiny figure entered Hua Hai's forehead, it didn't explode like the other flowers. Instead, it didn't shatter. This time, not only did his heart not shatter, it beat even harder than before. Thump! 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 Hua Hai could clearly feel his heart beating. After the tiny figure entered his body, his strength continued to rise. But just as he was wondering, feeling his body brimming with power, he suddenly clutched his chest and curled up in the air. Someone had taken a bite out of his heart. He circulated his spiritual energy and looked inside himself. At some point, the tiny golden figure had reappeared in his heart. His small hands cupped Hua Hai's heart, as if he had received his favorite candy. Bite after bite. Hua Hai's face was deathly pale. His entire body was covered in sweat. He knelt in the sky, sweat dripping down his arms and face. He wiped it away, gritted his teeth, and stood up. After the final rose bloomed, his strength had indeed increased by dozens of times. However, the pain he felt had also increased by dozens of times. When Jiangchen saw Hua Hai rise to his feet, a grave look flashed through his eyes. Pressure. Immense pressure. I can't wait any longer. In just a few breaths of time, Hua Hai's strength had risen to a level that even Jiangchen felt pressured. If he allowed this to continue. Attack. Jiangchen attacked without hesitation. Little did he know, this was exactly what Hua Hai wanted. It hurt too much. This kind of pain continuously stimulated his nerves. Even though this kind of pain could stimulate his anger, but he still wanted to. Chapter 9:17. The might of the fifth rose, Jiangchen roared, the veins on his arms bulging. This pressure was far too powerful. He couldn't allow it to grow any longer. He was indeed arrogant, but not to the point of conceit. His attacks were strange because of the pressure Hua Hai exerted on him. He didn't spare any energy to attack. Whether it was in terms of speed or physical strength, he pushed himself to his peak. He was truly serious. Die! He roared darkly. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that, as the eldest of the 4 zombie progenitors, Jiangchen possessed the power to look down on the entire lower 3 realms. If he attacked with all his might, even the ascended Jade Emperor might not be able to exchange 100 blows with him. In his eyes, the so-called peak sky immortals and half-step immortal kings were nothing more than clay chickens and pottery dogs. To his astonishment, however, Hua Hai actually withstood his attack. Scram! Jiangchen felt a sharp pain in his abdomen. Only then did he realize that Hua Hai's foot had landed on his abdomen. Boom! In the blink of an eye, Jiangchen shot out like a cannonball. His body whistled through the air as he slammed into a distant cliff. The entire mountain trembled uncontrollably. The other 3 zombie progenitors watched on as Jiangchen and Hua Hai exchanged blows. For a moment, they didn't even have time to react. Perhaps others didn't know Jiangchen's true strength, but they knew it all too well. But just now, Jiangchen was the one who'd been sent flying. The zombie progenitors were stunned. After a while, they came to their senses and roared, "Big brother! Big brother!" Hamba and Ho Ching sped towards a cliff. Ingo's eyes were bloodshot. Without any hesitation, he attacked Hua Hai. Bare-chested, Ingo stomped his feet on the ground, creating a huge crater several meters below him. Then, he flew up into the sky. Die! Ingo's arm swelled several times as he punched. For the sake of killing Hua Hai in one blow, he'd already concentrated all his power into his right arm. Umph! Up in the sky, Hua Hai snorted coldly, then viciously punched out at Ingo's fist. Arrogant! Ingo roared arrogantly. He knew he wasn't the smartest among the zombie progenitors, but his strength was something even Big Brother Jiangchen had to avoid. The way he saw it, Hua Hai was courting death by choosing to fight him head-on. Ingo's heart was filled with anger. He also wanted to teach this guy, who was neither a man nor a woman, a lesson. He didn't try to avoid Hua Hai's fist. He fiercely met Hua Hai's fist. Crack! The two fists collided, and a faint sound of bones breaking reached their ears. How could this be? He was brimming with confidence that he would teach Hua Hai a lesson. However, he did not expect that Ingo's arm would be the one to break. Hua Hai's outstretched arm twisted at an irregular angle, but Hua Hai's expression was as calm as ever. He smirked disdainfully, then exerted force with his right arm. Bang! Ingo, who had leaped into the air with his strength, fell heavily to the ground. Rumble! Ingo smashed into the ground, leaving behind a 300-meter-deep crater. The surrounding blood zombies and beast region cultivators were all caught off guard by the wild sand he kicked up when he fell. They were blinded by the sand. He, who had fallen to the ground, had all his bones broken. He could only lie on the ground, unable to move. Winning hook! Jiang Shun and the others returned from afar with furrowed brows. When they saw Ingo covered in blood and his skin split open, the usually rational Ho Ching wanted to rush forward with reddened eyes. Come back! Unexpectedly, just as he was about to attack, Jiang Shun fiercely grabbed him. Don't be rash. Jiang Shun frowned deeply. He tapped Ingo's body a few times with his finger. Ingo's condition is indeed terrible, but he's not dead yet. I know, but you want to get revenge for Ingo, don't you? You want to kill him to vent your anger, don't you? Said Jiang Shun calmly, staring at the emaciated Ho Ching. Me too, but what happened in the end? In terms of physique, Ingo is tens of thousands of times stronger than you. But what was the result? If you rush forward now, will you just throw your life away? Ho Ching clenched his fists and fell silent. Jiang Shun's gaze fell upon the sea of flowers overlooking them. He really hadn't expected him to be this strong. When the rose first appeared, he was already very afraid of it. However, he never would have guessed that it could increase his strength to such an extent. This was already more than the three realms could bear. Why hadn't the Master of the Laws appeared to punish him? Did the Master of the Laws intend to ignore him? TCH, he's at least as strong as a half-step Sky Supreme, said Gu Li, who was watching from afar. He sent Jiang Shun flying with one kick, then heavily injured Ingo with one punch. If this forbidden technique didn't have any side effects, that would be terrifying. They're your subordinates. You don't seem to care at all? Sneered Black Dragon. What's there to care about? They're just a bunch of chess pieces, said Gu Li, completely unconcerned. In truth, I'm more concerned about the loss. This demon's strength has clearly surpassed a certain level, but I don't see the laws punishing him. Emperor Yi, I'm impressed. As he spoke, Gu Li cupped his hands towards Yi Zichen. Yi Zichen looked on indifferently, but inwardly, he couldn't help but mutter, "Thank you, Linru. Linru, thank you. What do I do? What do I do?" Linru was as anxious as an ant on a hot pan. Hua Hai's strength had already provoked the laws, and the higher-ups wanted her to purge him. She was holding a jade scepter in her hand, its surface constantly flickering with red light. This was how the Master of the Laws communicated with each other. The flashing red light meant that the higher-ups were sending her a message. Purge the law violators. This was already the umpteenth time the higher-ups had tried to contact her. Linru saw it all, but she could only pretend she hadn't noticed. Hua Hai was a member of the Three Realms. Logically speaking, the Master of the Laws shouldn't have emotions. However, she did. Furthermore, she was far too familiar with the people of the Three Realms. She couldn't bear to see the three realms' mountains and rivers crumble, her country crumble, and her family perish. She didn't know what Huahai had done, but he'd punished the demons and zombies. How could she possibly purge them? The jade scepter in her hand continued to flicker. She was truly panicking. Forget it. After a brief moment of hesitation, Lin Ru steeled her resolve. She viciously threw the scepter to the ground. Bang! The jade rui, which was shining with red light, was smashed by her in an instant. Chapter 918. Chapter 918. Battle the zombie progenitors alone, obviously. This was what Lin Ru was thinking right now. When she smashed the jade scepter, her eyes betrayed her worry. However, she didn't think too much about it. She kicked the shattered jade scepter pieces into a corner, reached out, and opened a door in the air. Then she collapsed into the room within the door and fell into a deep sleep. Little did she know, Lin Ru's inaction was causing the zombie progenitors some distress. Big brother Jiangchun, don't scold Ho Qing. He's only acting like this because he's angry. But Ngo is our brother. Are we just going to let this go? Sensing the heavy atmosphere, Hamba couldn't help but speak up. Of course we can't just let this go. Jiangchun narrowed his eyes and gazed at the black rose floating in the sky. It was tens of thousands of meters tall, and its blooming was so beautiful. Anyone who saw it would think it was a beautiful thing. But it was a black rose. The rose had indeed increased the demon's strength by a significant amount, but he'd paid a hefty price to make it bloom. How long has it been? Jiangchun's eyes narrowed into slits as he suddenly sighed. His gaze flickered with reminiscence as he sneered. How long has it been since I've felt this way since I was born? After all, these zombie progenitors used to be the primordial vicious beast Danglong. Danglong was born a primordial vicious beast and the incarnation of the Godfather. Even in the God realm, no one dare provoke him. Back in the day, hadn't the Yao race's Eastern Emperor Tai treated him with the utmost respect? But now that he'd been bullied to this extent by a cultivator from the three realms, it was truly laughable. But then he thought about it. His soul had been split into three parts, one behind Ngo, Hamba, and Ho Qing. Jiangchun, on the other hand, was the main body, but had no soul at all. He didn't even have the slightest trace of his former demeanor. All of this was caused by that woman, Nuwa. His eyes flashed with sinister light. Whenever he thought of Nuwa and Fushi, his heart burned with fury. He'd get revenge sooner or later. However, if he wanted revenge, he had to combine the three parts of his soul into one, and that was the beast god's soul essence. He glanced at Guli. From his expression, it was clear that he didn't want to attack. Looks like I'll have to deal with it myself. Hamba, Ho Qing, said Jiangchun after a moment's thought. The two of them looked over. Jiangchun said, don't worry. That demon's strength is at least at the quasi-heavenly sovereign realm, and it's impossible for us to fight him alone. He's actually that strong. Ho Qing and Hamba both raised their brows. This is just my estimation. Of course, it doesn't matter even if he's a Sky Supreme right now. His strength is only temporary, said Jiangchun, trying to reassure them. Of course, it doesn't matter even if he's already a Sky Supreme. His strength is only temporary. The blooming of the black rose gave him extraordinary power, but he also had to pay an extremely high price. You've all heard that the price of blossoming is his life. What he's emitting now is just the residual heat. As long as we stall him, victory will be in our grasp. Then what should we do, big brother? Let's just do this. Up in the sky, Huahai looked down at Jiangchun and the others. The final bloom of the rose brought him unbearable pain. But on the other hand, his strength was indeed rising continuously, and there was no end to it. If the tiny person in his chest ate a mouthful of his heart, it would increase his strength by an immeasurable amount. However, this strength wasn't real. In the blink of an eye, the tiny person had eaten nearly half of his heart. Because he was in so much pain, he couldn't take the initiative to attack. He wanted to wait for the zombies to finish him off. But now, they were standing there motionlessly, and the tiny person was still leisurely eating his heart. He couldn't wait any longer. He had to end this quickly. Swoosh! Huahai, who'd remained motionless all this time, finally moved. Without hesitation, he attacked the three zombie progenitors. When they sensed the killing intent above them, the zombie progenitors instinctively scattered. "Just do as I said," shouted Jiangchen. Ho Qing and Hamba nodded. "It seems they're planning something," muttered Hua Hai. Hua Hai muttered to himself. However, he only smiled disdainfully. In the face of absolute power, everything else was meaningless. His words seemed brainless, but they were true. Oomph. With a cold snort, Hua Hai chased after Jiangchen. He could sense that Jiangchen was the backbone of the zombie progenitors. So long as he dealt with him, even if he died in the end, he'd heavily injured Ingo. Hamba and Ho Qing would be left to the people of the three realms to deal with. Die. Hua Hai's fist swung out without any flourishes, but Jiangchen had no way of dodging it. He took it head-on. Boom. His arm snapped. He gritted his teeth and retreated. Hua Hai wanted to chase after him, but Hamba and Ho Qing blocked his path. Three heroes against Lu Bu. The scene before them was somewhat similar. Unfortunately, the three of them weren't as well-coordinated as Lu, Guan, and Zhang of the Three Kingdoms. Hua Hai was also far stronger than Lu Bu. "Get out of my way." Bang, bang. In the time it took for a spark to fly off a flint, Ho Qing and Hamba were forced to retreat. After dealing with them, he reached for Jiangchen's wing. It must have just grown out. Smiling calmly, Hua Hai tore the wing off and tossed it to the ground. "If your brothers can't fly, why can't you?" Then he stomped viciously on Jiangchen's calf. "Big bro." Hamba and Ho Qing roared as they ran over. Hua Hai simply reached out and slapped them. "Behave yourselves," he said. Slap, slap. With two crisp sounds, the two of them flew far, far away. When he saw this, Jiangchen's eyes flashed with terror. How was this a half-step Sky Supreme? He was a Sky Supreme. More importantly, his strength was still continuously rising. He was already on the verge of becoming a saint. How could they possibly deal with such a person? Just obediently go and die. Hua Hai's fist came crashing down on Jiangchen's head. However, he suddenly furrowed his brows. His fist paused for a brief moment, then gnashed his teeth and smashed downwards. However, this brief pause was enough for Jiangchen. Bang! Hua Hai's fist fell. Jiangchen moved his head to the side. Hua Hai's fist had shattered his shoulder, but at least he wasn't dead. When he saw that his fist had missed, Hua Hai didn't hesitate. He swung his fist again. Thump! Jiangchen's heart clenched. This punch. Chapter 919. Black Rose blooming. Black Rose, get down. Hua Hai roared inwardly, his left hand still wrapped around Jiangchen's neck. However, his body wouldn't listen to his commands. He couldn't get down. Suddenly, intense pain radiated from his chest. Large beads of sweat rolled down his chin and onto Jiangchen's face. He was doing his best to endure the pain. He couldn't hold it in any longer. However, after enduring for a moment, Hua Hai couldn't bear the pain any longer. He clutched his chest, curled up into a ball, and screamed incessantly. Hua Hai clutched his chest and rolled on the ground, sweat pouring down his body. Before long, his clothes, which he had just managed to dry with great difficulty, were soaked once more. Hamba and Ho Qing hurried over to Jiangchen. They couldn't make heads or tails of Hua Hai's situation, but they were more concerned about Jiangchen's condition. Big brother. When they saw Jiangchen's injuries, they couldn't help but frown. However, Jiangchen couldn't help but laugh loudly. Ha ha, ha ha. He laughed hysterically, as if he was beside himself with joy. He glanced at Hamba, indicating for her to help him up. She hurriedly helped Jiangchen to his feet. "So what if you're saint? I beat you by half a move." Jiangchen's right shoulder and arm drooped. His calf was twisted at an irregular angle, but his eyes were filled with mockery. "Time's up, isn't it? Come on. If you got the guts, punch me." Hua Hai curled up into a ball and glared at Jiangchen, his eyes bloodshot. They were only half a meter apart. He wanted so badly to attack and finish him off, but he couldn't. The pain in his heart had already numbed his entire body. His consciousness gradually grew hazy. Damn it, he roared inwardly. Just give me 10 more seconds. No, just one more second. Just one more second. TCH. It seems time's up, said Gu Li, who'd been watching Hua Hai and the others all this time. He couldn't help but arch his brows and laugh. Brother Gu Li, you're truly skilled. It seems all of this was part of your plan, said Black Dragon. When he saw this, Black Dragon couldn't help but speak up. No wonder you didn't seem to care just now. Brother Gu Li, you're truly calculative. Your Excellency, Black Dragon, what are you talking about? Gu Li shook his head and smiled noncommittally. Gu Li and Black Dragon chatted casually, but Yi Zichen wasn't as relaxed as they were. The only reason he had been able to calm himself down and not attack was because he saw that Hua Hai had the absolute advantage. But now, Brother Yi, you're anxious, aren't you? Gu Li laughed playfully in Yi Zichen's ear. Don't be anxious. You have to stay calm. At this time, don't even think about making a move. Not to mention that your woman is with me. Even if you want to leave, you'll have to see if Lord Black Dragon and I agree. Gu Li, good job. Yi Zichen, who hadn't spoken yet, finally spoke up. When he saw Yi Zichen's fiery eyes, Gu Li merely smiled calmly, then put on a fearful expression. Don't worry. Emperor Yi actually praised me. I'm overwhelmed by the favor. Yi Zichen merely sneered and said nothing more. I thought that the demon would be able to perform for us for a while longer. I didn't think that he would be done after just a while. How boring. It seems the outcome has already been decided. There's no point in watching any longer. Emperor, shouldn't we have a good chat? As he spoke, Gu Li looked away. Yi Zichen glanced at him coolly. How do you want to chat? Let's chat. Shouldn't you return the Emperor's star's fortune? Before Gu Li could finish speaking, he suddenly felt a tremor in the depths of his soul. It wasn't just him. Black Dragon and Yi Zichen felt it as well. Or perhaps it wasn't just them. Everyone in the entire three realms felt it. Even Gu Zichen, who'd been hiding in the sky, felt it. Come on, aren't you supposed to be so strong? Try punching me again. Come on. Jiang Chen vented his fury over and over again. He used his uninjured leg to kick Hua Hai repeatedly. Why aren't you fighting back? Why aren't you fighting back? Didn't you just say you wanted to kill me? Bang! He gave Hua Hai a heavy kick, then squatted down and grabbed him by the hair. It was you, wasn't it? You tore off my wing, didn't you? Then where should I tear off? How about I break your arm? As soon as Jiang Chen finished speaking, Ingo yanked Hua Hai's left arm off. However, this sort of pain was nothing to Hua Hai. Give me a little more time. Just a little more time. Hua Hai cried out inwardly, as if begging the little man to give him more time. But the little man ignored him. He'd eaten the heart until only a tenth of its original size remained. He called out countless times, but all he got in return was indifference. Hua Hai gave up. But strangely at this moment he suddenly laughed. Retreat. This sudden smile startled Jiang Chen. He yelled at Hamba to retreat a few dozen meters, then stared intently at the sea of flowers. 10 minutes passed, but Hua Hai didn't move. Jiang Chen's face reddened at his earlier actions. Then he returned to Hua Hai's side. Just as he was about to vent his anger, his body began to tremble violently. It wasn't just him. Hamba and Ho Qing's eyes were filled with indescribable terror. He looked up at the sky and saw that the blooming roses were beginning to wilt. He watched as Hua Hai, curled up on the ground, formed a series of hand seals. Stop him, shouted Jiang Chen. Hamba and Ho Qing wanted to stop him, but their hearts were trembling. They couldn't control their bodies. At the same time, the little man eating Hua Hai's heart suddenly stopped. It hopped around wildly, as if afraid of Hua Hai's actions. Hua Hai had been observing his body this entire time. When he saw this, he couldn't help but sneer. Now you're worried? It's too late. Why did you stop all of a sudden? Eat. I told you to eat. Don't stop. Just now I begged you to give me a little more time, but you wouldn't. I understand now. My heart is actually your nourishment, right? You could have easily obtained it, but I'm sorry. Even if you beg me now, it's too late. A faint smile tugged at his lips. Hua Hai's hand stopped forming hand seals. In the blink of an eye, the roses in the sky withered and wilted. Then, one wilted petal after another fell from the sky. Chapter 9:20. A flower burial in the blink of an eye. The seductive black roses withered and turned yellow. The withered petals fell from the sky. They fell slowly, but irresistibly. Let's go together. Hua Hai curled up on the ground, his face contorted in pain. His smile, coupled with his pale face, seemed incredibly sinister. The withered petals seemed to envelop the entire sky. Jiang Chun stood on the ground and looked up at the petals above him. I can't let them fall. He roared anxiously, then did everything in his power to prevent the petals from falling. However, it was all to no avail. Run? There was no way. No matter how fast he was, would he be able to run out of its range in the time it took for the petals to fall? The answer was obvious. You're crazy. Jiang Chun, on the verge of collapse, roared at Hua Hai. Then do you want all the people of the three realms to die here? Why not? Hua Hai, who still had a breath left in him, laughed bitterly. I'm going to die sooner or later. Rather than dying at the hands of you filthy bastards, I might as well die in my flower burial. Isn't that right? When he heard this, Jiang Chun was truly afraid. From Hua Hai's eyes, he could see the madness within them. In his heart, that was really what he was thinking. You madman, you madman. Jiang Chun pulled at his hair and roared. Then he vented all his fury on Hua Hai. It didn't matter. Hua Hai allowed Jiang Chun's fists and feet to land on him. He didn't react at all. By now, his body was in tatters. Before long, he'd disappear from this world. Even if Jiang Chun and the others killed him now, it would only be a matter of time before he reincarnated. He didn't care. The only people he couldn't face were those who'd fought alongside him. He was truly sorry, but he'd have to go with him. But he didn't regret it. If he could wipe out the demons and zombies here, then sacrificing so many people would be worth it. This madman. When Guli saw this, he couldn't help but clutch his head. He was also within range of the petals. If the petals fell, he'd die too, especially the trembling that came from the depths of his soul. He didn't think that he could survive this flower burial. Yi Zichen, tell him to stop. Otherwise, we'll both die. He had no choice but to place his hopes of survival on Yi Zichen. Sect Master 100 Flowers is the Sect Master of the 100 Flowers Gate. Why does he have to listen to me? Even if he listens to me, why should I stop him? Yi Zichen chuckled. Can't you feel it? If those petals fall, we'll all die. We'll all die. This wasn't a game where they could distinguish between friendly and hostile firepower. This was an indiscriminate attack. You're going to die. Your woman is going to die. Everyone here is going to die. Is that so? Then die. However, Yi Zichen merely smiled calmly. His expression was indescribably relaxed and carefree. If I can wipe you all out here, so what if all of us are sent to our graves? Sect Master Hua did the right thing. I won't refuse. You. Guli reached out and grabbed Yi Zichen by the collar. Are you serious? Yes. A bunch of lunatics. Bang. Guli pushed Yi Zichen away. His eyes flashed with viciousness, then landed on Su Lu and Su Yen. Tell him to stop. Otherwise, I'll kill them right now. Yi Zichen's gaze wavered when he heard Su Lu, and Su Yen threaten him. Then, he closed his eyes and bowed deeply to them. Sorry. He said this to Su Lu, and the others. Su Lu, who was still clear-headed, understood. However, she didn't resist at all. Instead, she nodded affirmatively. It's fine. You're all crazy, all crazy. From their conversation, Guli could tell what they were thinking. He angrily tossed Su Lu, and Su Yen to the side, then clutched his head and paced back and forth. If the petals had fallen faster and killed them in an instant, he wouldn't have had to think so much. But the petals were falling very slowly. This sort of torment was enough to make one break down. It wasn't just him. Practically all of the demons and zombies felt the same way. They were starting to panic. They had the absolute advantage in the current situation. Why did they have to die here without even knowing what was going on? They were in such a panic that, for a moment, they were thrown into disarray. Meanwhile, the Immortal Region side seemed to have no regard for life or death. They all knew full well that even though they'd been saying they'd get out of here alive, who didn't know that this was all a lie? They had already made up their minds to die. Even if the petals fell and killed them, what could they do? Furthermore, he was able to pull in the demons and those filthy blood zombies. This business was definitely profitable. Brothers, before we die, let's kill a few more demons and zombies. Someone shouted from the crowd. The people of the three realms instantly agreed and charged forward. The demons, who'd lost their footing, were instantly scattered. A massacre. Brother Sue, can you stop the petal from falling? Black Dragon no longer looked at Yi Zichen. This was a moment of life and death. He was in no mood to worry about anything else. He knew he didn't have the ability to stop them, so he could only place his hopes on Su Iyun. Su Iyun sat in his chair, breathing faintly discernible. The weather wasn't exactly hot, but he was sweating profusely. I can't. After Black Dragon asked the question, he glanced at the petals and replied. Despair. When he heard this answer, Black Dragon despaired. Even Grandmaster Su, whom he'd always trusted, couldn't do it. Could it be? Was the demon race going to perish at his hands? But at this moment, a roar suddenly reached the ears of everyone who was enveloped by the black rose petals. They followed the source of the sound and saw a black shadow approaching the petal. It even lifted the petal up a little. Ingo. The zombie progenitors were the first to recognize the person holding the petals. Then they noticed that as soon as Ingo touched the petals, his arms were completely corroded. All that was left was a withered skeleton. What are you doing? Come back. Jiangchen couldn't help but shout. The zombie progenitors had known Wan Zichen for many years, so there was some affection between them. However, Jiangchen, a soulless man, wasn't worried about Ingo's safety. He was worried about his soul. Don't try to be brave. Come back. Ingo didn't respond in the slightest. Before long, he saw Ingo smile at Hamba and the others. Live on. Soon after, his expression hardened as he cried out explosively. Chapter 921. Jiangchen, I'll kill you. In an instant, space shattered. In an instant, the void shattered. A roiling sea of blood descended from the 9 heavens, transforming the entire sky into a sea of blood. Ingo stood in the sea of blood like a fish in water. His corroded skin instantly recovered, glowing with a crystalline luster. He fiercely dragged the 10,000-foot-long rose with both hands. The other roses were also enveloped in the sea of blood. Ingo, I told you to come back. As he stared at the sea of blood, Jiangchen's expression was even more frantic than when he'd felt like dying. Come back right now. I know what you're up to, but I don't need you to do it. Jiangchen was truly frantic. The Rakshasa Sea of Blood was Ingo's ultimate technique. If he used it, his soul would instantly perish. His previous self had died from using this ultimate technique. His soul. Ingo's body contained a third of Donglong's soul. If his soul shattered, then... Ingo, hurry up and come back. When he thought of this, Jiangchen shouted even more frantically. However, up in the sky, Ingo maintained his carefree smile the entire time. Big brother, third brother's gone. Don't try to be brave, come back. Before he could finish speaking, Jiangchen saw countless Rakshasas emerge from the sea of blood. Their bodies were stained with a bloodthirsty, murderous aura. They rushed towards the other petals in the sea of blood. Ingo, live well. Ingo raised the largest petal and roared, his face red. Then, boom, boom, boom. Everyone felt their vision turn white. Soon after, deafening explosions that nearly shattered their eardrums rang out incessantly in the void. For a full 15 minutes, the rumbling lasted for a quarter of an hour before it completely dissipated. When the crowd came to their senses, they discovered that it was raining blood. The rain didn't reek of blood, but it was red. At the same time, the rose that could make one's heart tremble also disappeared from the void. Ingo! Jiangchen roared, his eyes bloodshot. Hamba and Hoqing looked as if they'd just survived a calamity. When they heard Jiangchen's roar, they thought he was grieving over Ingo's death. They couldn't help but console him. Big brother, Ingo, we owe him our lives. Hamba feigned a pained expression as she spoke, but to her surprise, Jiangchen slapped her mercilessly across the face. Go and find him. We must find his corpse. Hamba was stunned by the slap. She covered her face with her hands, not knowing what to do. Hoqing glanced at it and said, Ingo's self-destructed. How can there still be a corpse? Then go find his soul for me. If you can't find it, then you can all die together. Gulp. Hoqing and Hamba couldn't help but gulp when they sensed Jiangchen's rage. They didn't dare to hesitate and left in a panic. It's all your fault. After Ho Ching and Hamba left, Jiangchun looked at Hua Hai. "It's all your fault, Pa." A palm landed on the top of Hua Hai's head. Hua Hai, who still had a sliver of consciousness, died instantly. However, before he died, he heaved a sigh of relief when he saw Ingo destroy the rose. Perhaps, from the bottom of his heart, he probably didn't want the people of the three realms to die with him. All of you still have a chance. Master. Off in the distance, Li Jiai happened to witness Jiangchun smack Hua Hai to death. She stared blankly at Hua Hai, then slowly closed her eyes. Then, she ran madly towards him. Master? Jiangchun turned around and saw Li Jiai sprinting towards him. Whoosh! She instantly disappeared. As she ran, Li Jiai felt as if someone had grabbed her by the neck. "You're that evil man's disciple? Give me back my master's life." Li Jiai didn't hesitate at all. She viciously stabbed at Jiangchun with her sword, but her already blunt, flexible sword was already difficult enough to cut through even ordinary blood zombies, let alone Jiangchun. Jiangchun was already worried about Ingo's soul. The evil man was the cause of all this. This kid was the evil man's disciple, yet he dared to provoke him? He exerted force in his arm, but his arm was suddenly in pain. A trace of blood appeared on his arm. Soon after, he turned his head around. Lin Shihe. The one who'd stopped Jiangchun was the city lord of Hundred Flower City, Lin Shihe. Hua Hai had contributed significantly to the founding of Hundred Flower City. She'd only become city lord because of Hua Hai's guidance. She'd always treated Hua Hai as both a teacher and a friend. Hua Hai had died for the sake of the three realms. She felt deep veneration for him. She couldn't prevent his death. All she could do was take good care of his only disciple, Li Jiai. As such, she'd paid close attention to Li Jiai's situation from the very beginning. Then, she saw Li Jiai run towards Jiangchun. Even though she knew she was no match for Jiangchun, she resolutely stepped forward. "Jiai, run. He's not someone you can handle. You're looking to die." Jiangchun was in a terrible mood. It wasn't enough that a little worm had provoked him, but now another little worm had popped up. The people of the three realms really did deserve to die. Fury flashed across Jiangchun's face. Berserk energy erupted from his body. Then he pulled back his arm and grabbed Lin Shihe by the neck. "Jiai, run." Her body trembled violently. Blinded by rage, Li Jiai chose to attack Jiangchun. However, when her rage subsided and she regained her rationality, she realized how insignificant she was. He looked at Lin Shihe, who was being held by the neck. Her frantic screams echoed in his ears. "Run." She ran without hesitation. "I'm sorry, but I'm truly sorry." She didn't dare save her. When Lin Shihe saw Li Jiai flee, a look of relief appeared on her face. Would she die? She didn't care at all. Her little sister was already an adult. She didn't need to take care of her anymore. The man she'd once loved had hurt her so deeply. There was nothing left for her to cling to. Die. Then just die. In his rage, Jiangchun suddenly tightened his grip. However, at that moment, Lin Shihe, whose heart had already turned to ash, suddenly began to struggle. She couldn't die. She still had her unborn child. Die! He snapped Lin Shihe's neck, but just as he was about to choke her to death, a figure sprinted towards him. When he saw Jiangchun toss Lin Shihe to the ground with her eyes wide open, the figure stopped. "Shihe." Then the figure sprinted madly towards Jiangchun. When he reached Lin Shihe, he hugged her tightly and sobbed. "I almost forgot. She was your woman," said Jiangchun. When he saw this, he arched his brows, then said, "That's enough. It's just a dead woman. What are you crying about?" "Zhao Zizhao, I order you to lead the blood zombies and slaughter the people of the three realms."